First that roughing the quarterback call, and then the miraculous granting of the timeout.
All right, I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight, and I'm going to call the Common Council meeting to order and ask you to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Michelle, if you could help me with the roll call, please.
Yes. Doug Saloga.
Present.
Jim Barrand.
Here.
Jackie Valdi. Here. Wayne Dean.
Here.
Matt Grimmer.
Here.
Kevin Maples.
Here.
Tim Eicher.
Here.
Ken Atwell.
Present.
Tom Hafner.
Here.
Thank you.
We have a full house. All right, we have two special orders of business tonight, and then we'll move on to citizens' comments, and then we'll move on to the rest of the items on the agenda, just so you understand the flow. And our first special order of business is a presentation by Dale Busser and friends from SORPAC regarding the lake management plan for Nagawicca Lake. If you guys could each introduce yourselves, please, and we'll let you take it from there.
Hello, my name is Tom Slosky, Chief Biologist at SORPAC.
I am Dale Busser from SORPAC. I'm an engineer and a hydrologist.
I'm Justin Poinsett from SORPAC, Senior Specialist and Biologist.
Great, well, thank you guys very much for coming. We're looking forward to your presentation tonight, and I'll let you go ahead and get started.
Well, we presented here once earlier in this room, recently, July, I believe it was, or something like that, July 10th. And we've made some updates to the presentation based on that initial rollout, and we also have updated the executive summary, which we'll distribute later and talk. But the presentation's roughly the same as it was a little bit earlier, but we've tried to clarify some points, so we'd appreciate your feedback.
So that came from the Lake Welfare Committee.
Right.
They presented in the Lake Welfare Committee, they got some feedback, made some changes in their back.
All right, well, thanks again for inviting us. I'll start us off. So this presentation is meant to be a presentation kind of based around the executive summary. It's kind of a brief overview of the management plan. If we can't go into all the details of the management plan, it would take all night. There's a lot there. But this is kind of hitting some of the highlights, some of the issues of concern that have been discussed, and trying to go more in depth in those issues. So I'll have a brief overview of lake conditions, discussion of aquatic plant management, some of the trends in water quality, looking at loading and accumulation of phosphorus and sediment, then reduction goals for pollutants, as well as priorities and recommendations, and finally an action list of actions to take to help reduce some of these pollutants in Nagawicca Lake.
I would like to point out that we are envisioning that perhaps the Lake Welfare Committee could post this on the website for the future, and that this would kind of be a standalone sort of thing along with the executive summary as helping to try and communicate the components of the plan and different parts of it.
So I'll just quickly kind of summarize overall trends in water quality, the aquatic plant community, the fishery, and recreational use. Generally speaking, Nagawicca Lake has pretty good water quality. It's a hard water lake, has pretty good water clarity, no problems with contaminants or E. coli, that kind of thing. And it's a mesotrophic status, which has been since the diversion back in the early 1980s. The aquatic plant community on Nagawicca is incredibly healthy. We've found 32 different species, mostly native species. I think only 3 were found. But overall, a pretty low invasive species presence. About 2% of the lake surveyed had invasives, and 98% was invasive free. We did find abundant muskgrass, or Cara. This is a really important native species to try to protect. Cara helps to remove phosphorus from the water column, and phosphorus is the nutrient that's causing, water clarity to go down, algal blooms, more abundant weed growth. So Cara really can help remove phosphorus from the water column, embed it in the sediment, and keep it down there and keeping the water healthy and clear. Overall, the fishery was quite healthy. There's a range of panfish and sport fish. As we discussed last time with the Lake Welfare Committee, technically Nagawicca Lake is still classified as a 2-story lake. They may not currently be supporting those conditions. but it is still classified as such. And potentially, with improvements in water quality, could attain that status again. And that might be a goal to try to strive for, because if you have a 2-story lake, you can have healthier, more abundant walleye and other sport fish, and so really can boost your fishery quite a bit. Speaking of which, Nagawicca, as we know, supports many recreational pursuits, swimming, boating, fishing, and sailing. And we've actually seen an increase in recreational use since the last management plan update in 2002. I did want to give some kudos to the aquatic plant management. The city of Delafield removes about 1,800 cubic yards of aquatic plants each year, about almost 30,000 yards since 2003. And that really helps to remove phosphorus from the lake. Aquatic plants are pulling phosphorus out of the water column. And as you're removing all these cubic yards of aquatic plants from the lake, that's also removing the phosphorus that they're collecting as well. So we've seen between 3,500 to 12,000 pounds of phosphorus removed from the lake since 2003. And that estimate's based on some different model estimates. We can go more into detail there in the actual plan. Again, as I mentioned, it's a really healthy aquatic plant community. This is a map here of species diversity. The larger the point, the more species are found at each individual point. So you can see those northern areas of the lake, the Kettle, the northwestern shore, really diverse aquatic plant community. Again, pretty low density of invasives compared to some of the lakes we have in the region, where you see just huge overgrowth of Eurasian milfoil and curly pondweed. So we do recommend to continue harvesting, help protect the native species, especially Cara, help remove phosphorus from the water column, and keep the algal growth and plant growth down. And also to continue the Clean Boats, Clean Waters program and help prevent the spread of invasive species to the lake. As we know, there are some invasives in the lake. There are other invasives in the area, including starry stonewort, that it's out there. It could be introduced, so definitely keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, they just found that in Lower Nabobbin, correct?
Yes, and Pewaukee as well.
Pewaukee, we're right in between them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely
Scary.
one that's on your doorstep.
The odds are against us.
Yeah.
We need that program to work.
Now, briefly describing some of the water quality trends. Again, as I mentioned, water quality, generally speaking, is pretty good. We have seen, this is a graph here showing trends since 1980. We just want to note there was a marked improvement in water quality from the 1970s to about 1980 once the effluent was diverted from the lake. The water quality was so poor it was off the scale of this chart. So for that reason, we've kind of not included in this figure to kind of show trends since then, because the lake's kind of in a new state since that point. So since that point, starting about 1985, we've seen improvements in algal abundance. It's going down, so water's clear. Improvements in Secchi depth, the actual measure of water clarity, it's getting more clear as time goes on. But we have seen a slight cause for concern with the phosphorus. So phosphorus concentrations have increased slightly. They're not back to where they were in the 1970s, but they have been increasing slightly, and that's a trend to monitor, because if they keep going up, you'll start to see some of these conditions that haven't been improving start to decline. As we know, again, phosphorus really can fuel a lot more growth by algae and aquatic plants, so keeping phosphorus down will help keep the lake clear and keep the aquatic plants in a healthy state. Any questions thus far?
So what's the source of the phosphorus?
That is something that Dale and Tom will be discussing at length here in a second. Thank you for your question, though. Speaking of which,
I'm just going to put a little bit more clarification, perhaps, in a couple points that have confused a few people in past presentations. One is, this is a hard water lake. The hard water is based on groundwater. We go into detail about the groundwater flow system in the report, and that's the reason. It's not that we thought it was something nice to talk about and to take space up in the report. The hard water system's dependent on groundwater, and the Cara is dependent on the hard water, and the phosphorus buffering of the lake is therefore dependent on groundwater, and that's a very important function of your lake. It protects your lake from becoming overly nutrient enriched. The other point, just anyone else has this question, some people have said, well, walleye don't require a 2-story lake. That's right. It's not that part of it that improves the fishery. It's not the temperature for the walleye. There's different prey species that can occupy different parts of the lake, and these other prey species. Cisco is the one I have in mind. It's in some of the other lakes around here. It's a superior food source for many game fish. They'll grow, number one, there's another type of prey available. Number two, they're very oily and consumable to the predator fish. So going on now to sediment sources, there was a question, this next series of slides has to do with a question put together by the Lake Welfare Committee about how much sediment is actually, I'm tired of leaning, is delivered to the lake by the Bark River, because there was some thought of dredging the mouth of the Bark River. How long may this last? So this first slide is just explanatory in nature. There's all kind of information about suspended load that's delivered to the lake, but suspended load isn't the only part of the story. There's other parts of the load. This little diagram that I have here, there's pieces of sediment that are too heavy to be carried in the water column. They roll along the bottom, they bounce along the bottom, and things like that, and that's called bed load. Now, bed load would be the thing that would be predominantly dropped out at the mouth of the river, when these particles that are just being moved by the river will stop moving once you hit still water. So that's the biggest part of the delta will right at the river mouth will be bed load. So the bed load, we don't have any information on bed load for this river, for the Bark River. We have a lot of information on suspended load, and there's a lot of variability for different rivers because there's different kind of sediments, different slopes, different land uses, and what have you across the spectrum. And it can range from anywhere from the bed load to suspended load range can be 0.1 to 10 times the relationship between the two. In general, in Wisconsin, what I've seen with the research, I've been able to find examples of rivers in Wisconsin. It's maybe 1/4 to 4 times. And for lack of a better number, a one-on-one estimate would be what I would choose in general. But given that I know a little bit more about the river, we've used another number. Nevertheless, I'll go into that in the next slide. Carrying on with that discussion, the suspended load is roughly equal to or somewhat smaller, somewhat larger than the bed load. What I used in our computations was that suspended load is 50 to 80% of the Bark River's total sediment load. So meaning that, well, you can do the math. But why I use the slippery when wet figure in the illustration in this slide is that these are just assumptions. We don't have hard data. If these are really important computations be known for you to make a selection process, this kind of information can be gathered in the field and you'll have a lot better estimate. Of course, there is variability. At high water, the bed load fraction is bigger. At low water, it can't transport as much, it's smaller. But nevertheless, we had to make a number of assumptions, and these are those. 50 to 80% of the Bark River's total load is suspended load. The bulk density of the sediment, I found some information from other lakes in the region where dredging was done. I used those. And then, this 50 to 80%, I chose halfway in between in my computation. So 65% of the load is suspended load and 35% is bed load. Again, that's just a pure old assumption based upon the information I have available to me. Anyway, you can read. There had to be a number of assumptions made. With this said, the Bark River, everyone points to it as the most important sediment load to the lake, and that's true. It's the largest single sediment source to the lake. And based upon the computations I have, made with these assumptions I just discussed, we got about 4,100 cubic yards of sediment delivered to a lake per year by the Bark River. And we have quite a bit of suspended information to back that up, suspended load information to back that up. However, that's the blue part of this pie diagram. However, if the blue part of the diagram of the pie diagram corresponds with the blue part of the map. Now, the red part of the diagram, which I'm calling the urbanized part of the Lake Direct watershed, although it is a smaller sediment load than the blue part, you can see how much of a smaller land area it comes from. I hope this is a clear way of presenting this because we've had some confusion generated by this. I'm not saying the Bark River isn't important. What we're trying to say is that per acre, there's more sediment coming from the red area than the blue area. But of course, the red area does not contribute to that delta area where the dredging is considered. So, any questions on this thus far?
So just to clarify, I think I get it, but so the kettle in that north part of the lake, because there's been measures and people have used examples of water runoff from area farms across the street, and we've worked with farmers to put up berms and other things. But that sediment load there is higher as far as like the sediment per acre, like you said,
sediment
and
per
it's
acre.
primarily attributed to the runoff from the area lands, like the farm, the roads, the stormwater, and that stuff, right?
The streets, the yards, and what have you,
Gotcha.
construction sites. This information is based on the USGS study.
Okay.
They actually took some measurements of some of this runoff coming into the lake.
So if you're from '04 through 18, is there a trend in this data? Because there's been quite an effort to install facilities to slow down some of the runoff.
I'm not sure if there's a trend right now. I know it's really, of course, periodic because the big runoff years, when we have a gully whopper kind of storm, there's a lot of sediment. But as far as year over year, that'll be interesting. We do have a graph in the report, if I remember correctly, and that can be an element that I make sure to touch on in the full report.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have one more. What's
Okay.
a two-story lake?
Two-story lake is a lake that has the ability of having fish that require cold water to live in them year-round. A two-story lake, the shallow water's warm, the deeper water's cold. A lot of lakes around here, the cold water stratum is devoid of oxygen or has very low oxygen. In a two-story lake, the part of the cold water layer is full of oxygen. And then these cold water loving fish, like you would find in Lake Michigan, can find refuge in that cold oxygenated water. Cold two-story lakes are oftentimes oligotrophic, more oligotrophic, meaning they're less nutrient intense, and there's less stuff raining down into the deeper layer, so the oxygen stays higher.
What kind of depth would make a two-story lake?
Some of the two-story lakes originally were amazingly shallow, 45 feet, but usually it's 100 foot or something.
And the neighboring Oconomowoc chain of lakes are two-story lakes and still sustaining two-story fisheries in them. So it's definitely achievable within the region, and they're extremely unique. And this classification makes it a unique water body in southeast Wisconsin. And the other way to think of the two-story lakes too is that surface or that subsurface cold oxygenated water throughout the entire column of the water body also helps to protect from internal loading from the lake, from the deep water sediments. So it's a also think of it as a protective mechanism too for improving water quality even greater and achieving greater, wildlife potential and water recreation potential. So it's not just a fisheries thing, it's a system-wide ecosystem sort of difference. It's very unique and it's high quality system.
It's very unique on a continent-wide scale. It's not necessarily really unique in our 10-mile radius, but this whole area is unique. And this lake did originally have Cisco in it, and I have pictures of them even in a publication, and I have measurements and so forth back in the 20s. I don't know when they went away, but they were here in the lifetimes of some of the individuals living in this community. And I can't say enough what Tom just said. The whole idea of having oxygenated water in deeper parts of the lake helps reinforce, keep the phosphorus in the sediment in the bottom, so it's kind of a self-reinforcing loop.
And the reason why we think it's potentially achievable is that our analysis of the deep water oxygenated layers have been improving over time. So they're being oxic or containing oxygen for a longer period throughout the summer, but not supporting it yet. And those concentrations have improved. So those are great trends. And so we're seeing a system-wide improvement. So if that were to be able to continue, so this along, with your aquatic plant management program and continued, dredging and we have other projects identified to reduce pollutant loading throughout the watershed. These are all parts of an overall plan to consecutively improve lake management overall, and hopefully it will continue to respond positively. So, but these are years, these are going to take time, but we've seen this improvement since 1980. So these are, many councilmen, many people, many partners, everyone, over time working towards this improvement. It's a 30-year plan, I think, what we're laying out for you, here. So, which is typical sewer pack plan, I guess.
Hey, Dale, the comment was made earlier that our phosphorus is trending upward. I'm a little bit surprised at that, given the ban on phosphorus and fertilizers. Is that ban evident in the data at all?
I'm not aware of the ban being evident in the data, but there is a trend evident in the data. Why don't we go back to that slide? That ban occurred, when was it again?
2000. It was before the state did it.
Yeah,
We were in
10 or
advance
12
of the
years
state.
ago?
I'll
10 years
say
ago?
one other thing that it could be connected to, and I'm not saying this is assuredly true, but the presence of zebra mussels can cause an increase in phosphorus in the lake as well. So there's another confounding issue that maybe phosphorus load was going down, but the phosphorus in the lake nevertheless could go up in the system. For example, the presence of zebra mussels can reduce the amount of, it can cause the trends we see in the upper two graphs and not have any improvement in water quality because of the phosphorus being excreted by the zebra mussels. So,
Okay.
And I've looked many times in our lakes for trying to tease that out, that signature of the phosphorus ban, and I've not really seen it. But I don't have an answer as to why. I think it's probably been an improvement. We know that changing the outfall from the treatment plant But that was such a huge amount of phosphorus that, that was kind of a no-brainer, to see a signature of that magnitude.
And just for clarification, when you say that, that's when we put in sewers.
Correct.
Which
Yes.
caused all the people that had, perking systems to abandon them, stop using them, connect to the sewer. That's what you're referring to.
Correct, yeah. Thanks.
Dale, I have a question. What is the current depth, or do we know what the current depth of the sediment load is at the delta?
The depth of sediment at the delta?
Yeah.
I don't know if I have the information, the total sediment depth at the delta. We
do have a map of it in the plan. Yeah, I think it's like 40, 50 inches.
I would wonder about the total sediment depth. I guess that's where I'm coming from. Somewhat organic versus sand
where I'm
and
going
so
with
forth.
this question is, what is the depth? What should the depth be? Obviously, it should be 0, but what would be an acceptable?
Well, it depends upon the goal. I think navigation is the goal at the river mouth, what I understand. And so what is typical navigation depth? 3 feet?
Well, the minimum is 3 feet.
Yeah.
Most of the lake is in the area, wherever the dam created the lake, right?
Yeah.
Most of those areas range from 10 to 6 feet is pretty typical.
So if you were going to say, if the goal is navigation, we'd want to have a minimum of 3 feet. And I think there was talk about removing 4 feet at one point in time in certain areas. So I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No.
Okay.
I want to know what the buildup of sediment is in the delta area.
Well,
Is it?
there's
is it
10,000 years of sediment there. That's it's difficult to answer your question. I can tell you how much gets there per year, and I can even give you some idea of the fractionation of it, perhaps, but as far as the total depth of sediment that's ever been moved there by the Bark River, that's another story, because part of it's actually 14,000 years ago. But we have this modern, or should I say more organic layer, that we have a layer. That would be the stuff, if you're going to remove sediment from the lake, that would be the best target. And I think we talked about this in one of our meetings. We even wonder about, we talked about Delafield and phosphorus credits and things like this. Now, if you would remove this organic rich sediment that would presumably be high in phosphorus from the lake, which is part of the Bark River system, would that be eligible for a phosphorus credit? I don't know the answer to that, but it would be an interesting scenario to play out and to investigate. And if that was the case, you'd want to remove the organic rich sediment, because the sand that was deposited during a lower water phase, when that dam is 6 feet, 7 feet high or something? I can't remember now.
I think it's 11.
11?
Yep.
We work on a lot of different lakes. I was thinking of Delafield, I think, is 7 feet high. But nevertheless, at a higher energy state, there would have been sand deposited there and not silt. And for the phosphorus trading, or not trading, but credit, removing sand won't provide any benefit, because there'll be a little bit of phosphorus mixed in with it, but the sand itself won't have phosphorus in it. So the organic, I hope this helps answer the question. The depth of the organic rich sediment would be a good target as far as removing.
That's what I was meant to ask.
And then as far as the navigation part, minimum of 3 feet would be where people need to get to.
Just seems kind of shallow, 3 foot.
It is, but dredging's very expensive. It depends, if you want to do X thousand cubic yards, you have to make it this big, and this deep, or this big, and that deep, so it really depends upon the goal.
And to help answer your question, Kevin, when we did got the permit from the DNR to allow anywhere on the lake that had less than 3 feet of water to be dredged, one of the things that had to be done was extensive polling throughout the entire lake, and I personally participated in that. So we have data on sediment depth everywhere within the lake, within that report. And when we checked the depths in the Bark River Delta area, we had either a 20 or a 30-foot pole, and in the center of that, we couldn't find bottom. So if that helps you get an idea of how
I just want to get a
deep
better
that is.
understanding of, everybody is focusing on the delta, and I'm looking at previous slide that shows the cubic yards per year. And again, I want to get an understanding of where the sediment's coming from,
Yep.
how it's getting deposited there.
Now, to answer, it's not necessarily answering your question, but I'm going to pick up on your question and move forward from it. The most important thing we can do is look into the future and try to get these loads reduced. There are methods that can be done to do that.
Which your report identifies several of those,
Yes,
right?
yes, and we identify parcels, and we might even enrich that. Maybe Tom might like to discuss that as part of his, but whatever we can do to reduce the amount of sediment being delivered to the lake is positive. Now, there's already sediment, there might be excessive amount of sediment in the river because it's a conveyor belt, right? It's got on the conveyor belt somewhere upstream, it's in transport, and it gets delivered. Even if we shut the supply off, the conveyor belt's still loaded, and it's going to take a while to reduce.
So if we theoretically went to 3 foot, if the conveyor belt's still going, does that mean that 3 foot's going to be 2 foot next year?
No, it's going to, you can project how long these dredging projects would last based upon my next slide. Okay.
Yeah, I think we should move forward. We're talking about a comprehensive thing.
Right.
We're talking fish and sediment, phosphorus. So I think we should move forward. We'll get stuck on this other topic soon enough.
Okay. Well, I'm going to move to the next slide. I think that'll maybe help answer your question too. So, making some assumptions again. Where does that sediment load wind up? So, we have about 2,900 cubic yards per year accumulating in the Bark River Delta. These are not different numbers than the last time because we've refined the estimates. And this is making some assumptions, half the suspended loads deposited in the delta and so forth. So you'll see, however, the sediment deposits in those short-run tributaries and direct runoff areas into the lake are also quite significant. That's the red area. And this does not account for geochemical processes in the lake. It doesn't account for dead plants or anything like that settling into the lake. This is material delivered outside the lake to the lake. I'm not talking about atmospheric, things that are delivered by water to the lake. I think, yeah. Well, I'm going to shift this whole thing. Maybe we should switch seats.
Oh, no, that's all right. So with that, and this whole process has been an evolution, and I know we're getting stuck in the weeds a little bit here with this issue, but this has been something that we've worked hard on with the members to get it right, to make sure that you'll be able to communicate the results of this plan and to formulate defensible arguments for moving forward with that delta, and helping to determine how long any interventions there would last. And so we don't mean to get kind of bogged down into this, but as part of our load analysis, though, it really helped to identify and prioritize different areas in the watershed to focus on. Basically, the best, most effective dollars spent on load reduction should be in this plan in and around the red areas of the lake, as Dale talked about, the areas directly tributary to Nagawicca Lake. Secondly would be the areas between the inlet and Merton Mill Pond, and then everything upstream of that would be third tier, so to speak. So if you had $1 to spend, where should you spend it? That's what this helps to define. And I think that's, and we have many projects within those areas. It's not to say any of those areas are not important, but for prioritizing effective dollars. That's what that does. And since Dale mentioned we're part of the Rock River TMDL, and again, we incorporated the load reduction goals. From that, you're part of a REACH that includes both the Delafield Delahart treatment plant and the Dousman wastewater treatment plant. And we incorporated this as a potential partner for project cost share. Perhaps if they would choose adaptive management instead of investing in their plant as a programmatic upgrade, much like the city of Oconomowoc has done, then partnering with the lake and cost sharing. Whether you can do dredging is unknown, but certainly buffers and maybe cover crop implementation or stormwater BMPs. So this was an important addition to the plan, and we broke each of the pollutant loads. So there's non-point source phosphorus and sediment from ag areas. There's non-point source from urban areas, and there's permitted MS4 load reduction goals and wastewater treatment plants also have. So you're connected to this. You're all connected to the same. This ties you all together to achieving the same goals. And we broke those down into pounds and cubic yards of material to give people a sense for how much that is. And the important thing too is that there are opportunities in the urban areas working with the MS4 community. So they're going to be also key partners for going above and beyond their permit conditions, doing demonstration projects and things. So that was incorporated too.
So a question, I know I've been a part of Delhart for a while, and I believe that we looked rather extensively at phosphorus credits for the surrounding areas in the watershed. What I'm hearing is something a little bit different than what I think we may have looked at in the past, and maybe I'm sure we'll have a conversation after this. But is it fair to say that a healthier lake, or Nagawicca Lake, that maybe could achieve this two-story status? Is it fair to say that in its current state, Nagawicca Lake is a point source for phosphorus based on how much weed growth there is, the presence of the zebra mussels, and just how much silt has been deposited there over the years, or is that not true?
I hesitate to give you the statistic, but Nagawicca Lake removes, I'll say this, the vast majority of phosphorus that enters Nagawicca Lake stays in the lake, so it's actually kind of like a wastewater treatment
That's what I was
plant
going to ask,
itself.
because I had read that before. It was something to do with the calcium on the bottom, or
The hard water lake,
yeah. Okay, but is there an argument to be made that there's room to improve that and make it even more effective? Is that part of what this plan is going to achieve?
Absolutely. That's the encouraging CARA, bringing back it's a self-reinforcing loop, like we said. If we could have more of the lake bottom not in contact with low oxygen or anoxic water, all those things would promote even more desirable.
Is there examples where that's been achieved in other lakes that we could leverage for that kind of proof, to go take a stack of papers to someone and say, read these reports, this is where we're investing our money, this is why we deserve credits? Or is this more than theory? It's theory, or?
I know of a couple studies, but it can probably give you 100, whereas the other way around, where the lakes went to pieces and then the phosphorus bled through. So especially with these aquatic plant communities and hard water systems, they're self-reinforcing in both directions. If the lake starts losing its capacity to buffer out the phosphorus, the thing can go pea green and phosphorus concentrations can greatly increase. So you can use it as a preventative from that happening.
I'll save more for
Tim,
a different venue.
Where is Delhart at with their phosphorus project?
It's actually part of that's my report later. We get the bids are in, we're doing something, and it's a little under budget from what we budgeted, but the Delhart's investing a little over $3 million in an updated filtration system, but it coincides with we stalled long it, so I might defer my report to now. we essentially, quote, dragged it along long enough with the mandate for phosphorus to get and ask for extensions to the point where we were bound to do this upgrade anyway. And so with the new disc filtration system and UV light system, we're reducing chemicals and we're going to hit our phosphorus numbers, but it doesn't mean that an improvement on those numbers after this upgrade next year isn't still eligible for credits. I mean, because the goal is we might be helping, we would be helping anyone else downstream. So the very intriguing, interesting thing as far as just the job that Nagawicca Lake does as a treatment facility for phosphorus already, and the need to do whatever it takes to maintain that. So I'm be interested. We'll definitely have you guys talking to Delhart sometime soon.
Excellent. I think I'm done. Do I have more? Yeah. Part of the project prioritization and the assessment, we did a shoreline, and we have some statistics in through there, and 52% of the shoreline is vegetated. So, congratulations. That's above average for many of the lakes, and so, but sorry to say the goal is 75%. So that's, but it's certainly achievable, and with that, to try and compartmentalize that and put it in perspective, we estimated, I can't read the pounds from here.
Additional 80 pounds per year.
An additional 80 pounds per year of total phosphorus and 14 cubic yards of suspended sediment, sediment. So, and if we went back one slide to put that kind of in perspective there, that was close to the permitted, non-permitted urban source load. So gives you a sense for why would you buffer your yard? Why would you install rain gardens? Why would you do these things? Well, you can achieve a real load reduction. And why should I do it on my yard? Well, you're part of our 75% goal, and you're part of our integrated plan to achieve that. And the great news is I know Nagawicca is already doing this, and so we're trying to give you the tools to help you continue to do that and continue to help people understand why that's so important. I mean, that's just from a loading perspective. There's all kinds of additional wildlife and water quality and shading and ecosystem benefits to that as well, and biodiversity. So, from a loading standpoint alone. But anyway, we also have shoreline goals, and there are also, more importantly, there's funding sources. Is this where we're transitioning here? Is this the last slide?
It's our second last.
Okay. So, yeah, the Healthy Lakes best management practices is in the process of expanding their permitting, not just to lakes, but to stream systems too. And so I forget how many exact miles there are upstream, but this is great news for as a tool for potential funding and getting more projects done, in that what I call the 75-foot minimum protective boundary on our riverways and waterways. So, but it's part of a system, so not just buffers, but near shore protection. We try to integrate it with wave action reduction too, reducing wave reflection, installing fish sticks, enhancing that near shore water plant community. So you have your zone before your shoreline, dissipating waves. You have your maybe rock toe properly sloped with a vegetation and then a buffer from the land, and so you have an integrated living shore that's doing far more than just riprap and grass, right? And so it's part of a system level, but there are great examples on the lake to emulate. So we encourage you. We sometimes never can get enough photos, but the utilization maybe of photos on your guys' website for good practices is a way to, we happily add more photos to this or to our plan, but showcasing, highly, functioning and what you're trying to actually achieve and why, so, but there's funding mechanism for it. Oh, yeah, and not to forget, we went through great lengths getting all the MS4 inventory community, so all the outfalls, stormwater treatment systems, so you could, basically look at them on a watershed basis. And we also identified even some that were unknown as part of our inventory. So there were some unique outfalls that we helped track down. But these areas too are opportunities for enhancement or retrofitting. A lot of your communities were constructed prior to the 1990s when any of these stormwater management practices were really not as state-of-the-art as they are now. So there's many opportunities for doing, promoting, rain gardens, bioswales, and floating islands like this graphic is showing here, which are essentially floating mats sucking up phosphorus out of the pond, so you're getting more credits and reducing that load. This is part of a whole suite of practices along with improving infrastructure, basically trying to pre-treat that water before it gets in your lake and slowing that water down, cooling it down, infiltrating it, giving it a chance for the connectivity through the infiltration to reduce its load and to improve its temperatures and so improve it overall through the lake. Did I miss anything? Oh, and we got summary slide there. So I think most of you have probably seen that. So we've expanded the executive summary, but we mostly expanded it from great comments that we had from a meeting we had last week with Mike and Kevin, and we think we're trying to celebrate all the things that everyone is doing to improve the water body and to maintain those practices and help people understand how much is being invested and what's good about the lake and what's working. So we felt it necessary to make it an 8-page.
One thing I'd like to just echo, something Tom was talking about, the adaptive management as far as wastewater. The thing that's nice about adaptive management, if it works for you, is if you put the investment in the concrete and steel and motors and what have you, that will achieve the goal, but it will only improve the water quality downstream of your community. Whereas if you can do things that improve the water quality within your community, you can enjoy that and it still benefits the downstream community. So you're just moving that point of reduction upstream to where you can hopefully experience the benefits it provides.
And one thing I just remembered, one of the continuing challenges we have, we established recommended buffers at the 75, 400, and 1,000 foot levels. We have these priority pollutant load areas. We're gonna prioritize and rank the agricultural parcels throughout all these areas as tier 1, 2, and 3. So this is one thing where it's a tool we've developed for the Fox River folks. We're doing it in Oconomowoc, and what it is anything tier 1 is any parcel, ag parcel that intersects water or is in the floodway is a tier 1. Anything that intersects with the floodplain is tier 2, and then any ag parcels outside of that catch-all is tier 3. And the idea then is any intersecting areas with water or moving water, that's the highest priority. Those are the areas we want to fix. So these are going to be targeted lands for cover crop BMPs, could be buffers too, could be other things. But the cover crop technologies and practices are really starting to take off, and we're seeing really tremendous load reduction, and farmers are either increasing their yield or they're decreasing their farming costs. And so one of the things that we're going to incorporate in here is that perhaps the district could, maybe the best investment they could be making is an interseeder, or what's another one? Something else. So I don't know all the practices, but the fact is you could
It's like no-till.
essentially, right, yeah, it's a specialized piece of equipment. Not all farmers have it. Not all farmers can afford to invest in it. But Ozaukee County, I can talk to.
Yeah, I'm from
Dale.
Ozaukee County, and my family has for-profit farming. I have cousins who are for-profit farmers. Crimper is the other thing they bought. But if you would like to investigate that, there's actually demonstration farms up in Ozaukee County that have been established by a farmer-led initiative. My cousin, well, actually it's my cousin's kid, but his first cousin, once removed or whatever, because he's taken over the farm, has not seen any yield loss, although he screwed up a few things first years, but he got it figured out. Now that he knows what he's doing, he's seen no yield loss, but he's seen his diesel expense go down by $10,000 a year, and he's still getting the same yield, so it's $10,000 dropping into his pocket. And with that, this cover crop technology, which is a little different than no-till, it's actually keeping the soil green, and also keeping the, I can go off on this for hours, I won't. But nevertheless, there's manifold benefits.
So Ozaukee County, they've purchased equipment and they rent it to the farmers.
Yeah, for example, the interseeder is rented out at $6 per acre. The interseeder costs $49,000, and the other piece of equipment I think was $6,000. So the thing is, a lot of the farmers are extremely conservative folk. They have to be, because we've basically, as a culture, pressed them into a very price-sensitive commodity issue. And this helps them try something new without putting their mortgage on the line. So,
And I think it really changes the dynamic of the conversation of, hey, you're polluting our lake, to, hey, perhaps you want to consider this technology. We'll give you this at a cheap rate. Just do it in our basin, in our area, because that's where you're farming. You're a priority in there. We don't want to put you out of business, but we do want to promote some improvements and protect our water quality. We can do this together. Another thing is there's keeping it green, keeping that the farms stay drier, so you can get in early. You can get in
crop
late.
later. You can get into the fields earlier.
Yeah.
The herbicide use goes down. There's a number of benefits. Again, I could go
Yeah.
into it ad nauseum.
So anyway, it's such a I haven't seen it's really like 100+ years of farming, turning it on its head.
And I wanted to mention one thing. You say this is all pie in the sky and blue sky kind of thing, so it's nice thought. Well, my family's from town of Belgium, the very corner of the southeast Wisconsin region. It started with 6 farmers. The last meeting we had was last Wednesday. There was 108 people. Not everyone was a farmer, but that's how much interest. And it's not, they had free lunch, okay? And that counted for something. But they weren't being forced to go or anything. There's interest because they see this as being something to enhance their farming operation and make them more viable as opposed to another hurdle.
And these are examples of adaptive management of phosphorus, right?
These could be used for adaptive management because they
the
reduce soil
sediment
erosion.
load coming into the water basin, you improve the health of Lake Nagawicca, and then the Delafield gets a credit against future, infrastructure improvements they need to make at their facility. So by spending the money there, you get all those benefits.
Right, and the farmer wins by improved soil health, reduced cost, and improved yields potentially.
Yeah,
So-
in many places they found improved yield because of the soil biota being improved, and also chemical input. I'd mentioned herbicide, but some of these crops actually are nitrogen fixing, for example, and they can cut back on their nitrogen loading applications.
So this is, I'm encouraging North Lake to do the same. I'm working with the Southeast Wisconsin Fox River Commission and trying to promote the same concepts. Racine County, they've developed their own farmer-led group, and they're sharing their ideas and practices. So maybe it's opportunity for Waukesha to, work with potentially the county or NRCS and, get them to establish the group in Nagawicca Lake watershed.
Right. So what other questions do the council have on the presentation? Any other questions?
Just thank you for your time,
Yeah, good stuff.
for the effort you put into it.
Thank you.
You're most welcome, and be happy to share this information with you. I want to do one more thing.
And how many total pages is it?
I don't know.
It's a lot.
It's big.
I think it's around
400 and
500.
something?
No, it's 500. I've read
Okay.
a lot of it. Yeah, it's really good.
So where do we go from here? I mean, the DNR has to review it now?
The DNR, we're actually in the process of adding a few things and refining some things, maybe hopefully knocking a couple pages out and making it a little bit more, when we can, readable. But DNR has to review it yet, yes.
So we got a grant extension until December 31st. What does that mean? Does that mean the report has to be done by then? Does that mean we have to pay your bill by then, or?
It means the report needs to be done by then. It would not need to be paid by then. The report needs to be completed by then.
Okay, do we see any concern about DNR getting the review done and in that amount of time? It's a big document to review, and
Heidi's had it for, yeah,
is Heidi the only person reviewing it?
yes. So she has a number of our other reports also on her desk.
She's got a full plate of work besides
yes.
reports, too.
And she's very engaged with field work, especially this year because of some changes in the state government. So she does usually get to these things after field season, which is,
I think today, actually. Today's the last day for phosphorus.
so anyway, hopefully she'll have more time coming up. But yeah, it's concerning for us too. We don't want to be the ones in your way. We're polishing right now. I don't think we are. If you guys are happy with the content.
We don't anticipate any significant comments from Heidi. The most challenging part of these plans, I would say, is always the aquatic plant management, and we work through those details, and you already got your permit, so I feel really confident, and that's that's never changed since then. So we just needed to sign off on it, and we'll be ready.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, as you communicate with her, can you remind her about our deadline with the grant?
Yep, we will do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, great. Seeing no further questions, thank you very much for bringing the report. Thank you for all the detail. I know some of it you kind of glossed over on how long sediment would last and stuff, but I do know that embedded in that report are the detailed answers to many of those questions. So we'll count on the Lake Welfare Committee to help summarize that when different topics come up, and use this as a tool in their toolbox to help communicate in the future.
Oh, we'll take some of that.
Great, so we'll have you guys wrap it up, and then we'll have our next special order of business presentation by Aaron. How do I say that? Gilbo from TAPCO regarding the benefits of portable speed signs with respect to the speed reduction and safety.
I'll take
Sure.
This chair's a little tall.
Couple of requests on that.
Awesome.
I already have one.
I had one.
Dale, this is the same one that you gave me last week? Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Dale, appreciate it.
Thank you.
I just wanted her. That's all, thank you. And I'll take an extra one because I have a couple people who might be interested.
Okay. So just a brief overview. Dale's here because I asked him to come and give this presentation to help us better understand how these units work, what their benefits are. You know, we approved a few of them in last year's capital budget, and we'll be asking for some additional ones. Previously, the council folks have said where they've had speed complaints in their districts, and we have that list of 5 or 6 places where we currently don't have them. We'll be looking to put them in. And I just want to give you guys an opportunity to have as much information about these units and how they're used in other municipalities and what their benefits are, and be able to ask the manufacturer questions about them and so forth. So take it away.
Hey, thanks everyone. Just real quickly, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So I've been with TAPCO about 15 years. If you're unfamiliar with TAPCO, we're a third generation family owned business since 1956. We have some key components to our business. We do a variety of things.
Can you talk into the mic?
Sure,
Not that they can't hear you, but the people on TV can't hear
Gotcha.
you.
Signal being one of our primary business models, and we do a lot of work with WisDOT and servicing a lot of their cabinets throughout the state. We also have a parking part of our business, and we do a lot of gates, ticket spitters, revenue generation. We actually have a full-time employee down at the airport at General Mitchell as well. A third part of our business is what we refer to as our IWS, Intelligent Warning Systems, which ranges from RRFBs, if you're familiar with that, pedestrian crossing systems. If you've been through the Marquette Interchange, the LED sequential chevron systems are another one of our intelligent warning systems. And lastly, our traffic division, which covers a lot of our driver feedback units, other consumables from cones to posts. We're a full-fledged sign manufacturer as well. So, and we're just up the road from you guys in Brown Deer here in Wisconsin. So I got about 30, 35 slides here. I'll go through them in relative haste. Some of them are a little bit more important than others. We'll keep it nice and relaxed. If you have questions, please chime in and we'll address it right then and there as well. I do have some materials, not enough for everyone, but I'll leave them here on the table for you guys if you'd like to take a look at them after the fact as well. And I don't have a connection to the PowerPoint, so I'll be asking for next slide here as we go through this. Next slide, please. So there's really some generally some main components when we're talking about areas of focus for our radar feedback signs. Probably going to be most important for you guys are going to be your school zones in the residential streets. Of course, there are some work zones here that you might have to work with, but by far and away, most of the radar feedback placements that we see are within school zones and the residential streets. Next slide, please. So when we talk about risk of injury on residential streets, it's typically concerns right now. I mean, in any community you come across in Wisconsin and throughout the country, we're talking about increased activity, more pedestrians, more biking. And so when we talk about residential streets, it's by far and away more dangerous than you say would interstate, because you're putting pedestrians and bicyclists in the mix with motorists. Even though speeds are a little bit less, there's a lot more for a motorist to be aware of. Next slide, please. So here's a neat little slide for you guys, and if you can look and follow around, at the bottom there it goes to the speeds. So from 20 to 30 to 40, 50, 60, etc. And just kind of gives you some numbers to go with what we all know. The faster you go, the longer it takes for you to process, and the longer it takes for your vehicle to slow down. So just, I want to kind of point out from 20 to 30, right, relatively slow speeds. Just from those two, it's almost double the distance for a motorist to process and slow the vehicle down. 10 miles an hour, it almost doubles.
I have a question.
Yes.
50 miles an hour, the stopping distance is 131 feet. 60 miles an hour is only 88 feet.
You're talking on the top for in the tan and the beige?
Yes.
So what's longer is if you look at the red. So the processing of you to actually to make the decision and slow down is where most of the time, the distance comes from. And what they're saying is, as you step on the brake and slow that speed down, it's relatively the same from that standpoint.
I think that the numbers are switched around. I think the 171 should be in the tan and the 88 should be in the red.
131.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that would make
Because I'm
sense.
looking at it.
You're right, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet. Next slide, please. So just kind of touching base here, things that we all know, right? Crashes at higher speeds are more dangerous. And again, as we throw in pedestrians and bicyclists, it becomes even more an increasing factor in safety. Next slide, please. So this one's really neat, and I was actually going to, before we got to this one, going to kind of quiz you on it, but take a look at those numbers. So if we're going at 20 miles an hour and there's an incident with a pedestrian that's struck, the chances of survival for that pedestrian are 95%. Okay? At 30 miles an hour, it goes down slightly to 80. And if we're at 40 miles an hour, it becomes pretty dire, only 10% survival rate. So most residential streets are probably about 25 miles an hour, right? That's what most of them are here in the village, I would assume. As a motorist myself, generally in a 25 mile an hour zone, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm usually going anywhere from 30 to 35. So if you take a look at that number, we're in between probably 80% if I'm driving 30, and if I'm up to 35, we're a little bit closer to 40%. So if you have some radar feedbacks that are alerting motorists to slow them down even 5 miles an hour, those chances of survival for that pedestrian in an incident dramatically increase. Next slide, please. So again, things we all know, right? Speeding is excess and driving too fast for conditions. What I thought was really interesting about this slide here, 1/3 of all fatal crashes have to do with speed. All right, so if we can slow those motorists down even a fraction, that number goes down as well. Next slide, please. Another statistic for you guys too. So the increase in speeding-related fatalities on local roads, more than any other type of roads. That's above interstates, highways, and it's no longer a problem that specifically with high-speed roadways, right? It's not just interstates and those highways. It's residential streets, and that's why you'll see a lot of focus from homeowners associations taking a look at a lot of these radar feedback units and other traffic calming measures. Next slide, please. And there is just another statistic for you guys to kind of go along with it. 86% of speeding-related fatalities occur on non-interstate highways. And 40.4 billion, I don't know by your measure, but that's quite a bit nationally for spending, right, on fatalities with speed-related accidents. Next slide, please. So there's a lot more that just goes into speeding. So there's beliefs and attitudes, and I think a lot of times we underestimate the weather. I know the first snowfall every year in Wisconsin here, someone's driving about 10, 15 miles an hour, and we get a little antsy and want them to go faster. So that's certainly one reason that aids in a lot of the issues that we see. We overestimate our driving skills as well, right? We think we're better than we are. Next slide, please. And I think what's neat too, the attitude about it, and I'm guilty of it as well, and I'm sure you folks are as well. We talk about an accident. It was an accident, right? We didn't mean to. But really it's not, right? It's the driver's fault because in the majority of the time, as we've seen in some of the statistics, it is a driver's fault related to speed. Next slide, please. Again, all the things we know, right? We're behind schedule, unaware of the speed limit, trying to keep up with traffic. I think speeding is neat for the younger kids, right? So these are all reasons that focusing on the 3 E's, as we'll talk about here in a slide in a couple minutes, are critical for any municipality to take a look at. Next slide, please. Education, enforcement, and engineering. All right. A couple more slides here. We'll talk about what's the proper route to take when approaching these 3 E's. But almost in any situation, education is an important part of it. Whether it's working with schools, high schools, with kids that are younger ages driving, starting to get the roadways. I know we have a national night out where I'm from, and I don't know if you folks do something similar to that.
We do.
That's a great education tool, right? So those are the types of education things that we're talking about. Enforcement, all right? There has to be a little bit of awareness and cooperation from the police department and other folks to really take a look at it, right? We can't just say this is what we're going to do and educate folks. We got to have some teeth behind it, so that's where the enforcement part comes in. And lastly, engineering, right? When all else fails, we kind of take a look at the roadway. You folks use an engineering firm, or do you have an engineering group here within the village, the city?
The city, we have SCH, we contract out engineering.
So those folks would be great people to take a look at. What can we do? Bump outs are one way that a lot of people do it. You see raised sidewalks are another avenue. So that type of engineering is what we're talking about. Next slide, please. And since I just covered this one, we'll skip to the next one as well. All right. So from an education standpoint, some radar speed display signs and other devices, neighborhood newsletters are things we see a lot. And I know a lot of communities, I'll see little lawn signs, drive like your kid lived here. Those types of things are another good educational tools as well. Next slide, please. So the enforcement part about it, I kind of wanted to touch on. So yeah, having increased police presence helps. But what also helps is knowing where the issues are, right? We all have constituents that'll call and say, hey, this guy is speeding through here every day going to work at 7:30 a.m. And we'll put a police car, a patrol out there, and we'll come to find out he's not really speeding. So the perception sometimes is that they are, but what's really neat when we're talking about radar feedback signs, we can put them into stealth mode where we're gathering data and really defining if there is an issue in that specific area. With the new technology on the radar feedbacks as well, there's solar powered, there's AC powered, there's battery powered. So what a lot of folks will do, limited funds and resources, they might purchase, let's say, a battery powered unit. And that unit basically serves as 2 weeks and move to the next location, 2 weeks and move to the next location. And there's tangible data that shows that if you leave a radar feedback sign in one area for too long, sometimes motorists become immune to it. And so moving it around has generally a larger impact on slowing motorists down as well. Next slide, please. And again, the engineering stuff, right? There's more than just radar feedback signs. There's speed humps, there's speed bumps. There's a lot of other engineering tools that they have, that if you're really wanting to implement something, talking to SEH and finding some additional measures too. Next slide, please. So what I think is most important, like we can sit here and we can talk about all these different options and all of these issues, but I think where it really comes down to is a plan, right? We've got to have a plan, somewhere to start, and how we're going to approach this. I'm going to assume that the fact that I'm here, that this is a general topic of concern. So this is a great first step, right? Having a
Speeding
plan.
is like our #1 complaint in this community, right? Real or unreal, it's the complaint.
Right. In real or unreal, right? That's really the issue too. That takes up a lot of the chief's time, a lot of the police department's time. If they're fielding these calls, if you guys are fielding these calls, having a radar feedback sign with some data, some limited data capability, will go a long way. If you have constituents come look at reports and say, look, we have data right here, take a look. The speeding that you think is happening might not be, and you'll be able to take your police department to other issues, more concerning issues, instead of fielding complaints. Next slide, please. So here are just some general recommendations. These aren't my recommendations. These aren't anybody's recommendations, but a general rule of thumb. So some of your low volume, local residential streets, which I imagine are probably primarily what you have here, education and engineering strategy is a good approach, right? Some of the education stuff we talked about, some of those engineering things we talked about. Education issues typically are a lot cheaper and less costly than engineering. So that might be the first focus and first thing you guys look at. Next slide. So moderate volume, so we're talking 35 to 45, maybe even 55 miles an hour. This is where we start talking a little bit more about more engineering, right? You can do this with radar speed signs, other traffic calming devices like speed humps. Have you folks seen any speed humps, speed tables, those types of things?
Yeah.
Okay. And I know they make them for emergency personnel. So do you guys have your own fire department emergency here, or do you work with the county, or how does that work?
We have our own department.
Okay. So there's other speed tables that will thin down, so they're wheel-based. They'll be able to pass over without worrying about driving over these things, whereas a vehicle, a car, a truck would still feel that impact of going too fast over that speed hump and slowing them down. Next slide, please. I won't touch too much on this, but then again, this is higher volume roads. You guys don't have anything that's 55 miles an hour that goes through here, really, correct? Maybe on the outskirts, but you know, that's some of the more engineering things as well. Additional signage, whatever the case may be. Next slide, please. So here's just a sample purpose statement, right? The purpose of a neighborhood traffic calming program is to improve the livability and quality of your residents, neighboring communities through the deployment of traffic calming devices, right? So this is something that you could take and put out to your constituents and say, hey, look, we understand it's a problem, we want to address it, here's our purpose statement, and this is why we're making some changes, or we want to do some certain things.
And we're going to collect data to measure the problem.
Exactly. Correct. Next slide, please. So another big thing that we always talk about, being reactive and proactive, right? Being reactive is, I think, what folks generally tend to do in a lot of things, right? There's not an issue until there's an issue. But I think there's something to be said for being proactive, right? Seeing an issue, whether it's perceived or not, to address it and get ahead of it, and to start talking about it proactively instead of waiting until an issue arises that might be a little bit more costly than you anticipated by just simply being proactive on the front end. Next slide, please. So again, so measuring effectiveness, right? What can we do here? What percentage of vehicles are speeding? What days? What time? How fast are they going? So these are all things that can be accomplished through data collection. There's a couple different ways you can collect data. Nowadays, with the new technology, you can actually do this via the cloud. So you can sit in your office as a public works director or as a chief of police, and you can actually take a look at this stuff in real time on the cloud. If you have multiple devices, it's a great tool instead of designating folks to go out and check these things. If you have just a few, it's very simple, and you don't have a lot of miles of roadway here to check. If you only have a couple boards, you simply use a Bluetooth, and that's something that you can go download and take a look at, whether you implement it daily, implement it weekly, monthly, whatever the case may be. So there's some options for you in terms of collecting that data. Next slide, please. And again, just some different methods for you guys here too, so I won't spend too much time on this. Trees even, right? So something that's so basic and so simple, as you pinch roadways down a little bit, it slows drivers down, right? That's why we talk about when we narrowing and engineering firms will focus their roadways where they narrow down at a crosswalk, and it slows motorists down too. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of different radar speed signs as well. So we talked about AC powered, we talked about battery powered, we talked about solar powered. There's different sizes, right? There's different colors, school zones. We can use fluorescent yellow, green. So there's a variety of messages. You can do a full matrix where you're implementing messages. You can be as simple and basic as simply allowing the motorists to see how fast they're going. So there's a lot of different setups that you can kind of take a look at. Next slide, please. So measuring those oncoming vehicle speeds, you can display their speed, and it's obviously been shown to reduce speeds immensely. All right, so if there is a concern, this is certainly something I would recommend you guys to take a look at. There's a lot of different options again, so we can fit these to what your budget is. We can fit them to what your need is. It doesn't even have to be a radar feedback sign. There's other options as well. So keep your minds open, discussions open, and certainly there's a way to accomplish what you guys are after in your goals. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. They did. So we talked about, again, the stealth mode. So stealth mode basically turns the sign off, but it's still on. So the motorist will not get a speed coming back at them, but it will still be collecting data. In its truest sense and form, this is really where you get the best data, right? If someone thinks they're not being looked at, their true nature is going to show in their driving habits, and you really find out some good data that you can pass along. Next slide, please. So this is just some impact. So there's a couple of case studies, and I'll let you guys read through this as you want. I'm not going to get too far into it, but you can just see in the numbers the percentage in speeds that drop, the percentage in calls that drop to the police department and to you folks as well. So it's a big impact. Next slide, please. And I won't spend too much time on this either, but I do have a couple of handouts as well. It's a little bit more robust, I guess, if you will. So there are speed camera signs that are available. You can use them with or without a radar feedback sign. We see a lot of homeowners associations will implement these, and where they have the capability as a municipality might not necessarily. They can pass these out. I have some templates that I don't have with me, but I can pass along that basically show license plate. They know who you are. They send you a warning. If it continues to happen, maybe they revoke your passes for certain access in that homeowner association. You can write tickets out of it. So there's a lot of different options and availability regarding these cameras. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So here's one of those homeowner associations I spoke about. So over a 6-year period, you see there tried a number of different options, and it just wasn't doing what they needed to do. So they installed 3 of these cameras, and their speeds dropped by 10 miles an hour. Violations reduced from 40% down to almost 10%. And all of their board there at the homeowner association can access that data and manage it remotely. So that's another great feature too. Again, you don't need to be local on site with that camera to extract the data from it. Next slide, please. As I mentioned at the top of it too, so just slowing motorists down a few miles an hour, right, from 20 miles an hour with a 95% survivability to 30 miles an hour incident, 80% survivability, right? So if we can even slow them down just a bit, it makes an immense impact. Next slide. So again, my contact information is up there. You guys have access to all this. If there's any questions I can help answer for you guys, I appreciate your time, and look forward to hearing from you soon.
What's your cell number?
I have business cards here.
Okay.
As well.
Questions? That was some good information. Covered a lot of different things.
Yeah, I went through it pretty fast. So if there's anything that you want to focus on or have additional questions on, it can certainly be reached offline as well.
Do the signs that we have today, I know we have some of the portable ones
Yep.
and some permanent ones, do they collect the data?
Yes.
And is this data like real like cloud-based, or is it something that we have to go and collect it off the machine?
Yeah, so cloud-based is a service that requires an annual fee,
Yeah.
right? But the Bluetooth is, as long as it's built into the unit, it's simply a matter of the police chief setting a schedule for an officer to go by and stop with his phone, and it takes, how long does it take to download the information? 30 seconds?
Yeah, not long at all.
Yeah.
Is that what we have in our?
And they're off, yeah.
Okay.
And exactly how we use that data and how we implement it are all great questions for the chief.
Yeah.
But the signs that we've purchased include this technology and the functions that he mostly described, right? So some are solar, some are battery, we have a mix, some are portable, like you said, and some, a couple of it are earlier models where they were permanent mounts. But everything we've bought in the last couple of years is portable.
So has there been, return on investment studies that say, because I imagine, especially in some kind of stealth mode, that the more you can focus police, watching activity around hotspots, if you know where the hotspot is, based on some of this technology, because I imagine it changes, right?
Yeah,
It's not
of course.
probably dynamic, so I don't know if there's return on investment studies that you guys have done in the past with other municipalities or.
We may have some of that data I can pass along, and I'll certainly look. Ultimately, the goal isn't necessarily to dispatch the police department to pull over every motorist, right? You want to try and curb habit. You want to create people with good practices. That's ultimately what you're after. To speak a little bit what the mayor was saying, so the data collection that you guys currently have is a Bluetooth. So the limitation of the Bluetooth is that you need to be fairly close, right? So I think it's probably within about 30 feet. So sometimes, if it's not immediately on the side of the road.
They could all do it from the car, they don't even have to get out.
Yep, so during the wintertime, the police car can pull up to it and be able to extract that data. And as you mentioned too, with the cloud, it's modem based, right? So you're doing a subscription, an annual fee. So like I mentioned, and why I mentioned, if you have 8 to 10 of these things, then doing something cloud-based becomes a little bit more manageable, because now you're going around to 8 to 10 different locations extracting data. It's eating up a chunk of personnel's time. But if you have 3, 4, 5 units in your smaller community, you don't have a ton of roadway in between signs, it's simpler and more cost-effective to do Bluetooth.
Aaron, you mentioned speed humps and speed tables. Can you talk about the compatibility of those with plow trucks in the Midwest climate?
Sure. So we're actually going through some testing right now with the city of Madison and doing some speed tables. It can be challenging. I know the other option is concrete or blacktop, and that stuff chews up as well. We see a lot of folks will typically use, so speed humps are a little bit smaller. And what we'll see those do is, universities, schools, those types of campuses will actually pull them up in the wintertime, because they're just put in with some spikes or some lag bolts. But they're, it's not snow plowable, so they do need to be aware that if they are going to stay there year round, that they need to pick up the blade in that general area.
So a speed hump can be either something removable like you talked about, or it can just be constructed out of asphalt or concrete, right? Either way?
It could, yes.
Okay.
Well, great, well, thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item 3, City of Delafield citizens' comments. Are there any citizens that would like to come up and make a citizen's comment? Come on up, John. I think I saw his hand first.
Do I have to sit there?
Yes, you come on up here, John, and please tell us your name.
Because I feel like I can speak better while I'm standing.
Well, you're going to have to sit down in front of the mic there. And we need you to tell us your name and address, and then please speak into the mic so the people on TV can hear you. And we try to get you to limit no more than 3 minutes.
Please.
My name is John Wiedenhaft. I live in the city of Delafield at 908 Sunset Drive. And I would like to make a comment as far as the 4-way stop sign that may or may not go in depending on you people. But I am for it over here at Oneida and Main Street. Myself personally, I'm a motorcyclist, and twice this year I've had to stop emergency style from somebody running a stop sign. And I would say it might have been this close or it might have been that close, but I don't know. There's no time for a horn. It's just you gotta stop. So, I don't know if you need to know how to spell my name. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, John.
Yep.
All right, Len, come on up. You're our only other citizen, unless a planning commissioner wants to come up, who's a citizen too.
Does it matter which mic?
I don't think so.
This isn't as bad as it looks, I promise.
Thank you.
Lynn Holton, 485 Lillian Court, Delafield. I am resubmitting my testimony given at the public hearing at the Plan Commission on 8/29 in regards to the repeal of the protest petition option we have in our zoning code. That public hearing and its purpose is the premier example of what I've been objecting to for several years now. I strongly object to the drop-in and out-of-the-blue zoning amendment. In my opinion, it was unauthorized, unwarranted, and arbitrary. In my opinion, the timing is blatant and appears convenient. If you refer to what I gave you, the 1787 changes and amendments to the general changes and amendments to the zoning code, item 1 is the authority. Who has the authority? Common Council, which is why I'm here tonight, because you have the final authority. Item 2 is who can initiate a public hearing. A change or an amendment may be initiated by the Common Council, Plan Commission, or the landowner within the zoning district. And the state statute also gives the option to the Board of Zoning Appeals. That's who has the authority. Where did this public hearing and zoning amendment originate? No discussion was held at the Common Council or the Plan Commission level, which means no one in authority initiated the public hearing, the amendment, or the drafted ordinance we're going to have to pay for. The mayor cannot, the staff cannot. They can bring it to your attention, and the Plan Commissions, but they cannot do what was done. They slipped it in, they put it on the agenda as an action item, and they posted a public hearing without authorization. Who are these unauthorized initiators? Who do they serve? It's time you need to ask. This is not a one-time oops. When is the usurpation of power from the Plan Commission and Common Council going to stop? It's been going on. When will the steering and the manipulation of power no longer be tolerated? If you refer to Attorney Hammis's letter, the third paragraph, he says this repeal of this section of the zoning code is consistent with the recent revisions of section 6223 in the state code. True, you would be being consistent in the fact that you would be taking the same action that the state did. The state did repeal a protest petition pertaining to Act 67 and conditional uses, but you are not being told the whole story. You'll notice that Attorney Hammis did not use the terms required by state statute or to be in compliance with state statute or Act 67. Why didn't he state that in writing? Because this repeal action is not required or demanded by Act 67 or state statute. It is strictly up to the city and up to you. If you, in the handout I gave you, this is a second opinion, legal opinion, from Mallory and Zimmerman. If you look at paragraph 4, which I highlighted, it says you can presume that the city can uphold a protest petition ordinance if they have it in their zoning code. And the most two important sentences are the last two that says nothing in 2017 Wisconsin Act 67 restricts cities from honoring protest petitions or creating protest petition ordinances. And nothing in the Wisconsin statutes prohibits a city from requiring by ordinance a supermajority vote for rezoning. That is the whole story. In my opinion, this broad, unauthorized repeal at this time puts the city in a very vulnerable position, open to possible challenge, not only in the failure of due process, but the arbitrary timing. At a time when two large developments are looming, you would be denying citizens a long-held right given to them by our zoning code. This does not look good. Why now? Has it been a problem? To my knowledge, a protest petition was only filed once in our 50-year history. 1787-8 in our zoning code gives us this repeal option, protest option. And it is to somewhat level the playing field when the government acts in an arbitrary manner. It protects the citizens and it could prevent lawsuits. This repeal ordinance would strip all of us in every neighborhood, in every corner of Delafield, of the right that has been granted by our code for decades. Any open land or redevelopment project, every amendment or zoning change would be at the sole discretion of whoever is sitting in the big chairs. And if those chairholders, which are currently you, but in the future anyone, are not convinced or influenced by citizen evidence, the only option left is circuit court. This is an untimely, unauthorized attempt to gain advantage. I ask you why. And finally, I ask you, is that okay with you? Thank you.
Great, thank you for your comments. Seeing no other citizens that would like to speak, citizens' comments are now closed. And we'll move on to item number 4, consent agenda. Is there a motion for the consent agenda?
I'll second it.
Okay. Wayne? Yep. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes? All right, we'll move on to number 5, committee reports. Licenses?
I have 3 licenses that are on the agenda for tonight. I would ask you to permit me to read all 3 of them, potentially make a motion for all 3 of them at the same time, if that's okay. Otherwise, you can parse it out. The first one is discussion and action to approve an agent change for Quick Trip on Sun Valley Drive from John Lamb to David Krupe. Police background check was approved on that one. Second one is discussion and action to approve another agent change for Pick and Save at Village Square Drive from Eric Thomas to Joan Zimmerman, pending a background check. And the third item is discussion and possible action on the approval of the temporary Class B retailer's license for St. John's Northwestern Military Academy for their Fall Fest on October 5th.
Move to approve those licenses.
Oh, second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Passes. Thank you, Michelle. All right, we'll move on to 5B, Planning Commission. Mr. Eichert.
Okay, Plan Commission, couple of quick items here. The first is action on a conditional use permit for ID Restaurant. They're enclosing a veranda on the south, I believe, the northwest corner, I believe. And they're putting in retractable windows, so it's more like a 3 seasons room than a half a season room. So I'll make a motion to approve this, and it was the conditional use for ID Restaurant.
Second.
And it was, for what it's worth, it was unanimously approved at Planning Commission.
The windows all look architecturally correct for the building. So, is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes.
The second one is for an amended conditional use for Shops at Nagawicca. This is relative, very, very close to the Chick-fil-A project that's going in. There's just a change in the center island so that trucks can get over it. It was mutually agreed to by the tenants and the owners, and this was again another one that was mutually or unanimously approved. So I'll make a motion to approve this amended conditional use permit for Shops at Nagawicca.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
The third
Abstentions?
item
Passes.
Third item for action here, Mrs. Holton just talked about it. This was actually something that was unanimously rejected as far as the recommendation to update the ordinance to eliminate the petition method that we have currently in our code. And just for a quick review, if you recall, the only one that I'm familiar with in my tenure is the Prestwick development. There was a zoning change that was presented, and the current ordinance allows, there's specific parameters. You have to be a neighboring property and have a certain percentage of adjacent land. But the zoning change is rather dramatic, and our current ordinance allows, given a petition, it requires that in order for that zoning type of change to go into effect, supermajority of the council, which means no more than one,
No vote.
no vote is allowed. So if you have two people that vote against a zoning change like that, it would fail. And that's actually exactly what happened with one step in the Prestwick chain. And my rationale was if it's a good enough argument against that you can get not just the person who's in that district representing that district. If you can get one more person outside the district to say, no, this is a bad idea, the zoning change probably is a bad idea, or it's at least not appropriate for the time. So I won't make the motion here, but I will say that I did in the Plan Commission to reject it, and I thought it's a decent right to have that kind of last line of defense for something where you talk to your neighbors, not everybody is looking at the individual public hearings and notices, and this kind of helps prevent somebody from getting caught a little off guard, in my opinion.
So are you saying, it's a discussion in
I'm
action?
I'm saying that the Plan Commission
Unanimously voted no.
rejected this
To
update.
leave it on the books.
Leave it on the books.
So-
And their main objection, as I recall, was that they didn't really like the timing of it, right? As our citizens spoke, there were a couple of items that were coming up, and they generally just didn't like it for now, and unanimously rejected it.
So are we going to ignore opinions of our city attorney as a matter of course? Because we don't like.
The city attorney's asking that we, take the opportunity to follow the rules, bring it for discussion, and it'll go where it goes. So its first attempt by the first group was a unanimous no, and now it's up to you guys to decide if you would like to implement this or not.
There's any hurry to it, but
There isn't any hurry.
If you have these inconsistencies, they in themselves will involve litigation someday. And so if something is, and there was a reason the state statute was changed. I don't know that I agree with it, but there was a reason.
It doesn't make it right. I think maybe I'm not smart enough to understand, but it just flies in the face of the principles of democracy in my mind. So I appreciate that the Plan Commission unanimously recommended denial. I maybe just don't understand it enough. It just doesn't seem right. So I don't like it at all. So I would concur with a denial. So I don't know how to do that.
Any other discussion? Anybody want to make a motion to try to approve it or deny it?
I make the motion to concur with the Plan Commission's recommendation to deny change.
And I'll second.
Okay. Now, is there any other discussion?
I'll just say I didn't read into, and maybe I'm too close to it, I didn't read into anything nefarious about the timing. And just knowing where we're at with zoning, and we run across stuff that doesn't sync up with changes in Madison all the time. And I guess it's possible to read into it more than that, but I thought it was a matter of when we were looking at building height and all these other things, and how Act 67 dealt with conditional uses and and that. So anyways, that's in support of the fact that I still think denial is a good reason regardless of timing.
Okay. Seeing no other discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Passes. All right.
And I just referred to it. The other thing to look at coming up in our next meeting, we did have in our past meeting, we did have a discussion about just the general topic of building heights, and there's a lot of different things about perspective. And in particular, we're looking at CBD 1 and what goes on downtown, and how to manage intensity of use and parking, and what's appropriate for heights and setbacks. And so we're really close. I think there's language that's in the Plan Commission packet, or that will be for the next meeting, regarding establishing a more consistent, or at least legible, coherent way to interpret what building height is, what the max height is, and what the requirements are if you want to build something a little taller than what we already see downtown. And so look for that and weigh in, because we're likely to act on those changes in the code next meeting at the end of the month. And that's it for Plan Commission.
All right, then we'll move on to Lake Welfare Committee. Mr. Maples.
We had a meeting on September 11th. We had a discussion regarding the review of the draft version of all chapters of the Sewer Pack Watershed Survey, Water Quality and Sediment Survey, Nagawicca Lake Shoreline Assessment, and the final report and recommendations. As witnessed earlier, Sewer Pack representatives were here and gave us a presentation. The Sewer Pack documents can be viewed on the City of Delafield website through November of this year. Second thing, we had a ongoing discussion pertaining to creating a Welcome to the Lake program. Committee member Tills is spearheading this. Discussion occurred regarding the items and information that would be beneficial to include in the welcome packet. Member Tills stated that he wanted to accomplish providing information about two important factors. First, how to enjoy the lake. Second, how to protect it. I will be briefing the Common Council on the program when the program is ready. Member Tills is hoping to launch the program sometime next year.
Sounds like a great idea.
I agree.
All righty. We'll move on to the next item, 5D, Park and Recreation Committee. Mr. Grimmer?
Yeah, Park and Rec had a August 26th meeting, items for discussion with the Bark River Plaza kind of restoration and seeing if we can spray that concrete. Mr. Mayor, did you have an opportunity to take a look at the work that they did today, or Tom?
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, we both did.
I was not able to.
Yeah, also Jim Ryer and Tim Turnock were also out there.
Right.
For those that might not be aware, there was some concerns about the quality of the finish of the concrete work in the plaza. Some inconsistencies and some poor workmanship. What we've been able to do is we've negotiated a credit with the contractor for just short of $15,000, and we've hired another contractor what he's going to do is use glass media to blast the concrete, and it's going to give us an exposed aggregate finish look, which a lot of people, including myself, would consider a premium treatment or a premium look compared to what we were originally expecting to get in the first place. And so today they started that work, and we all took a look at they did one square as a sample of what it's going to look like. At 10 o'clock we took a look at what the blasting would look like, and then in the afternoon at 3 o'clock we looked at it after they put sealer on it, and we were all pleased with the results and gave them the thumbs up to move forward with doing that work. So that's probably going to be about 10 days to 2 weeks that they'll be working out there. That plaza will be closed to people during that time, and we're excited about what it's going to look like after they're done.
Yeah, I think it'll be a great result from a tenuous finish. One of the other discussion items for action was the American Legion lease. It's my understanding that the city entered into a lease with the American Legion many years ago for use of the ballpark there. There was discussion and action at Park and Rec to terminate that lease. However, because of just not using it anymore, DPW spends, your estimate was roughly 8,000 a year in man hours.
Well, $8,000 a year is the lease payment that the city pays to the Legion, approximately. I think it's in that ballpark. In addition to that, we pay their utility bills. We are also fully responsible for maintenance of the grounds, maintenance of their bathrooms, things like that. So it's significant investment, and currently for a few years now, there's been no city programs using their ball fields, so we're not getting anything back out of the lease. And then also, I don't know if you're going to mention this, Matt, but there's language in the lease saying that the lease can be terminated with 60 days advance notice. And if we do that within 60 days before this December 31st, then the lease terminates. It still runs through all of 2020 and doesn't terminate till the end of 2020.
Correct. So one of the challenges that we have, unfortunately, we haven't engaged in discussions with the Legion yet, and given the council's past history of maybe not over-communicating, I think it's prudent to table this item until our next meeting.
Yeah, I think we should talk to them.
Yep.
Because we don't want to have that miscommunication.
Yes.
Exactly.
In light of our other subject.
We've learned.
But I can see, with our budget problems, this is stuff we may have to look at, and they're going to have to understand, because I do recall.
We need to have that discussion.
At the time.
And make sure they do
at the time.
Understand the facts we have to deal with.
We were trying to expand our ball program without expanding the public expenditure for, we bought land, but the improvements cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there was a valid reason for thinking to do this. They may have become dependent on it now from a cash flow, so I think we got to make sure before any decision is made, we talk to them.
Absolutely. And so I'll make the motion to table this item until our next meeting to offer our
Can
opportunity.
you change that to postpone?
Postpone.
Thank you.
I'll
Sure.
second.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention passes. Thank you. All right. Is that
No,
it?
that's it.
Okay. The next council meeting.
October 7th.
Yeah. Okay, 5E, Public Works. Mr. Dean.
At our September 4th meeting, there was considerable discussion and public comments, public input regarding putting a four-way stop at Main and Oneida Street. And some of the pictures of rollover accident are in your packet. So the Public Works Committee unanimously passed to you guys saying we want a four-way stop at Main and Oneida. So I'd like to make the motion to approve a four-way stop at Main Street and Oneida.
I'll second it.
And I strongly support this action of putting that stop sign there. I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, I had an incident at the next street over as you're coming into City Hall that was stopping 2 directions but not the other. Went through the process, right? Filled out the paperwork, submitted it to the Public Works Committee, traffic staff reviewed it, then Planning and Public Works made a recommendation. That's the same process that's happened here. So.
And that has worked well.
And it has worked well.
Yes.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Passes. Anything else, Mr. Dean?
Not for Public Works.
Okay, F, Delahart, Mr. Eicher.
I mentioned it briefly, but we have been working on complying with this was a volunteer phosphorus limit that the state imposed on ourselves several years ago, maybe 10 years ago. And we just received bids. They came in about what we expected, a little bit less maybe, but it's about $3.2 or $3.3 million in that range to upgrade different systems that coincide with the need to do a different upgrade anyway. This isn't, the other upgrade would not have been 3.2, but it helped save some money. And so that just came through, and we're going to be taking action on that likely tomorrow. Hopefully we award it and we get the work done next year. And also something interesting, if you read your League of Municipalities newsletter, there's talk in Madison, and I urge you to kind of keep your eye on it about PFAs, these perfluoral and polyfluoral alkaloids that are a hot topic. There's not a lot of data on how dangerous they are or what they actually do, but they stick around forever, and they're ending up in our water supply everywhere. But there's a movement by the current administration in Madison to look into imposing limits that could be very expensive again. So hopefully it would be for a good reason. So keep your eyes on those. Other than that, also one commissioner short. So if anyone's interested in finding out what makes this city tick, sign up, fill out an application, and sign up for Delhart.
I may have an idea. I'll encourage somebody.
Okay, good. All right, and that's it for me. We got a meeting tomorrow night.
Great, thank you. Okay, 5G, Police Commission, Mr. Sloga.
No meeting, no report.
Alrighty. 5H, Library Board, Ms. Valdi.
We met last week, so it's on September 10th, the Library Board of Trustees. We have 2 new members, Tricia Madden and Betsy Felix, on the Library Board. They're both a welcome addition and are enthusiastic to get started. They're kind of A+ students. The Friends of the Library is again doing a fundraisers with Culver's as part of their Culver's Share Nights. The next one is Monday, September 30th from 5 until 8. The proceeds go to the Friends, but that all goes to the library. The library hosted a Get the Most Out of Your Cell Phone workshop. Remember when phones were phones? Now they're computers with phone functions. 40 people, adults, showed up. They're actually going to restructure 2 classes, so beginning and then more advanced options for people. The library also offers one-on-one tech lessons for 30 minutes at a time with a member of staff. They do so many cool things. They were part of the Fall Art Walk last week. The library board doesn't even know this yet. It's hot off the press. Our director, Stephanie, applied, and the library was chosen to the recipient of the 2019 Pewaukee Area Arts Council Community Art Placement. So 2 paintings are being gifted to our library. They're commissioned by local artists with a theme around Lake Nagawicca. They will be placed in the library sometime around October, November. Next Library Board of Trustees meeting is October 8th.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Barron, 5I, Zoning Board of Appeals.
No meeting.
Alrighty, 5J, Promotion and Tourism, Mr. Sloga.
Yeah, there's 2 meetings. One I was present. They had a meeting last week. It was a makeup meeting that I was not present. Most of the conversation on the tourism board was around the budget, which they did pass. There was a lot of conversation around how the tourism and promotion committee can work closer with the city. I wasn't at the last common council meeting, so I don't know if any of this was discussed, but there's a strong desire from the committee to get more feedback from the city, especially when it comes around tourism related projects. Actually, the budget that they passed, the additional it's approximately $42,000, is contingent. The money forwarded to the city would be contingent upon the city offering projects that are related to tourism. And I think it should be a fairly easy exercise. Things like trails that we put in a lot. There was actually a comment that was brought up by the Hendricks Corporation of, if the city has to go through any kind of rezoning or even a master plan exercise, maybe some of those funds could be related to tourism and therefore co-funded by the tourism project or committee. I had asked them one of the meetings, what are the main reasons people come to the city? The number 1 reason is recreation, and the number 2 is food and dining. So, once again, any kind of expenses that are related to that, those endeavors, once again, could be documented and forwarded to the tourism and promotion committee. I mean, the bottom line is that they, over the last, every meeting I've been involved with, there's a consternation that they want more feedback from the city on where funds are going from the tourism and promotion, because they feel they have to respond from a transparency perspective that the funds that are being forwarded to the city have to go towards tourism and promotion. And they would like that feedback. So I am just forwarding opinions and what I hear at these meetings. So that was about it from the last meeting. So, I don't know if that request is coming to the city, or Tom, if you're getting that from some of the people, or if there's only communication around that subject.
Yeah, I actually have a meeting scheduled tomorrow afternoon with Mary Daniel.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
We have had a list of things that they've told us that would qualify. It has like, I believe, 10 different things on it, signs like being one of them, right?
Absolutely.
That they deemed as, worthy of living up to their commitment to the state and the fees, and also things that could help us out with our operating budget. And fine-tuning those numbers has been a struggle for a number of years, and I hope we're getting closer. Great.
Thank you.
All right, 5K, Lake Country Fire Commission, not aware of any meeting, so no report. 5L, Lake Country Fire Board, Mr. Grimmer?
Two items. Specifically, the first is the activity report. We saw a little increased activity in the third quarter, start of July, which was beneficial to our some of the operating revenue, where the first two quarters we were a little bit in the red. We had had a good July, and so the budget is keeping up with well, the budget amount is keeping up with the revenues that we're taking in, so that is good news. The second item is the 2020 budget was approved by the fire board, and I'll just run through some of the highlights. I've mentioned a few of these before. The main thrust of the 2020 budget and for the next 4 years is a change in the staffing. For the last several years, Lake Country Fire and Rescue has operated primarily off a part-time staff. They had great feeder programs in the HS Squared school. They got kids in. There was an intern program, and they were able to transition those kids into new hires. However, what has happened is that program has evolved now that Lake Country, where HS Squared and their training center was a feeder to the Lake Country Fire and Rescue. Now Lake Country Fire and Rescue is a feeder to other departments because, number one, other departments recognize the great job that Lake Country Fire and Rescue does in training these folks, and they are more, Lake Country Fire and Rescue is mostly middle of the road when it comes to pay and benefits. A lot of people are leaving Lake Country and Fire and Rescue not because they don't love the work and love the area, but because they're looking for full-time employment. So the 2020 budget and the next 4 budgets therein are moving the staffing from more part-time, less part-time to more full-time. That full-time staffing obviously has costs associated with it. I'll talk about those costs in a second. The decreased costs are minimal, but they are worth noting. There is less gear, less training, et cetera, as you have less overall staff members. So, what that staffing increase is basically they've done 2 things. They've increased the intern program, essentially doubling the number of interns that Lake Country and Fire and Rescue quote employs. And they have, we have used our unassigned fund balance, which was $112,945, used that unassigned fund balance and allocated that fund balance over the next 4 years to offset the cost of transitioning to full-time employment. You could consider it a subsidy of sorts for the next 4 years. There will be a drop-off in year 5, but that unassigned fund balance will help support that transition. As a result, the board passed a net increase of a little over $6,000 to the communities at a 0.48% increase, and that is net. The gross was $48,000, or a 3.9% increase. The plan for moving forward over the next 4 years is to grow our way out of this challenge, this drop-off in year 5. Lake Country Fire and Rescue has always been very conservative in their revenue estimates. They continue to be conservative in their revenue estimates for this year and for 2020. We've allocated an increase in our marketing budget to get our name out there a little bit better, to be a little bit more savvy in our marketing efforts. We've got a few community members who have volunteered their time and talents, who obviously are marketing gurus. And so we increased our marketing budget, I think, by 50%. We're hoping to see greater expansion of the training center and the training center revenues moving forward. Questions on any of that? Oh, one caveat is that the expectation was for a 4% increase in health premiums, health costs, health insurance, and that came in at 6.5, is my understanding. So that'll be a net negative of an additional $5,000, and the city shares in that 6.5 increase.
Hey, Matt, just one concept I think it's important for the council to understand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you talked about the contribution from the municipalities going up about $6,000, maybe about 0.5%, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it needs to be understood that that gets run through a formula that changes year to year.
Correct.
And the city of Delafield is growing. The city of Delafield's calls are increasing year over year. And our partners, they're not growing, and their calls are staying stable. And so what that actually means is, even though the contribution from all communities is going up about $6,000, the contribution from Neshota and Shaniqua is actually going down year over year. And I believe our contribution is a fair amount higher than $6,000. I think it may be in the $15,000 to $20,000 range, if I remember right.
No, you're correct. And when I joined Lake Country back in the day, I think our allocation was 72, 73%. I remember a number like that. Now
Something
we're
like
up
that,
to 77, 78%. I mean, that's just been in 5 years.
That's right.
Yeah, and so that's, to Tom's point, that's the funding formula that we see, and I don't know that trend abates anytime soon.
So it's a similar story, right? I mean, there's real needs to take on these full-time firefighters, but yet we don't have the operating budget to fund it. You know, I attended the meeting. They worked really hard to take some of these dollars from the fund balance to help offset it. But at the end of the day, it's an unfunded liability, right? We don't have future revenues coming into the city of Delafield to cover these costs. We already are on the wrong trajectory and going to run out of our own, you know, nest egg of money in the next 4 to 5 years. And when we add these kind of costs, it just makes that time even shorter. And we did a similar thing when we hired 2 extra police officers, right? So fire and safety and the police are very important, and we all value that in this community, but those costs are going up, and we don't have the revenue growth to offset those. So just important to, again, reiterate that, you know, we have a problem, right? And while this is needed, it makes the problem worse.
Well, I don't have a problem with the 4-year use of the fund balance, because some folks will say, why do you sit on this cash?
No.
And yeah, but in the end game is if we don't have cap room, I guess, because we are capped by state statutes, we're going to have trouble in a few years.
A few is right?
People should appreciate, though, we have a first-class fire department, and we happen to have some neighbors to help us pay for it. And fire departments are one big fixed cost. So if we're growing and they're not, I guess we do. The fair thing is we do have to pay more of it. But
that's the agreement we made, and we're following it.
And finally, every community is facing this, and we are actually ahead of the game with what we've created. And you hear the stories about Sussex, Lisbon, and Pewaukee, and even Oconomowoc yet. The problem finding full-time professionals, because it's really not a part-time volunteer operation anymore. So we kind of bit the bullet, I think, 15 years ago already and did it. So yeah, I think they're doing a great job, and I know you're watching it.
We just got to figure out a way to pay for it, folks.
Well,
That's
just
all
think
I'm
of the
saying.
situation we would be without the training center and without the revenue
Yeah,
that they bring in.
I'm not saying they're not doing a good
No,
job,
I
right?
know, absolutely.
So we need we need new taxable development without growth.
That's,
Right? I mean,
yeah.
It's easy.
We laugh,
All right,
guys and gals,
let's
but
figure that
it's a
one out.
serious problem,
No.
right? And I just want to reiterate it again, that
Well,
we as a group have to figure out how we're going to solve that.
Our new construction this year was 0.75%. The countywide was 1.5%.
Yeah.
Places like Brookfield, it's 3%.
But too, if it's all apartment buildings, then your fire department bill's going way up and your taxable
No, I
revenue's not going up.
understand
Yeah, so it's right, we have to find the magic
Yeah.
piece of growth. Yeah.
And some of it is even single-family housing, we could probably use a little more.
Yep, I get it, yeah.
Anything else, Mr. Grimmer?
No. Joint meeting is October 3rd.
Is the public welcome to that?
Yes.
Anyone wants to come? All right.
Sure, all are welcome.
Fire station
Number
number
2.
2.
Neshota.
Nice. All right, 5M, Tree Board, Mr. Grimmer.
No meeting, no report.
Thank you. 5N, Deer Management Committee, Mr. Dean.
So far, we have 104 hunters who've applied to hunt. Of those, 93 want to hunt from our city stands. 11 want just nuisance tags to hunt on private property. And 70 of those hunters also want to be matched with a landowner. So I have 70 hunters who want to be matched with a landowner with hunt on private property, and I have only 11 landowners. So we'd like to get more people who want to participate in the landowner matching program. Those 104 hunters have already signed up for over 70 appointment times to pick times to hunt from the 8 different stands that we have throughout the city. Met today with the town of Delafield, Ron Troy, the chairperson. We're working together with the DNR also to try and coordinate efforts between both the city and the town and deer management. We've also been meeting with Neshota. Neshota will be using the same firm that we use for sharpshooting. They will go with them in January and then continue with us in February at the same price that we paid last year. That's my report.
Great. So I'm going to ask the council members and all of you out there, in particular, a lot of you have talked to me in the past about wanting to control the deer population for safety and many other reasons. Please call the city hall, call me, call your alderperson. If you're willing to let people onto your private property to bow hunt, we have a long list of people waiting to do that, and we need you to reach out and contact us so we can get you on the list and do the matching program. So please, alder folks, if you know people that have complained about it in your districts, please call them and ask them to sign up. Just call City Hall and we'll get them what they need.
How large a property really works? Yeah, I know there's kind of a limit, isn't there?
There isn't a limit.
Okay.
As long as, according to city ordinance, if you're hunting within 100 yards of a dwelling on somebody else's property, you have written permission from those people to
So
hunt there.
it's the 100-yard distance.
You can hunt
Which would be
within 25
interest-
if they give you
Okay,
permission.
all right.
So you can hunt in your backyard if the neighbors around you within 100 yards.
And if you have 4 smaller parcels together, a half acre or 3/4 acres, you can sign up as a group,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
And now
that
you've
works.
got a much larger area.
okay.
So great. Thank you, Mr. Dean. All right, number 6, no unfinished business. Mayor's report, 7A, discussion and possible action on the proposed 2020 Common Council meeting schedule. You guys had that in your packet, and Tom and Michelle put this together, and it basically shows the same number of meetings that we had this year, next year.
Don't we have to make a change in the code because our Chapter 2 of the municipal code says that our meetings of the city council need to be held on the first and third Monday of every month at 7 p.m. And the last time I asked this, I was told that this year was like experimental. So I'm just wondering, do we have to do something official before we take a third of our meetings away. I mean, we're sitting here at 9:15 and we still have a lot to do, so I would rather have more meetings less long, so we can focus better on stuff. So that's a personal plea, but also just practically from a following what our bylaws say. Don't we have to make it, like public comments or a notice or something before we just change and lose a third of our meetings?
Well, public comment or public notice wouldn't be required, but you're right. If once we do decide what we want to do permanently, we should change Chapter 2.
Okay, but if we do it 2 years in a row, is that a de facto permanent change, or is this just another experiment? I just want to make sure we're following.
I'd be looking for direction from the council on that.
Okay. Just a question.
I have missed not having more meetings, so from an alderman's perspective, it's better. But I thought we did this partially for financial purposes. So that's the question. The schedule that's proposed works fine to get our business done. But I will say that the 2-month, historically, I think, keeps us more connected with what's going on. So, and yet there were always 3 that we knocked out, usually in summer.
And I'll just say that we've had multiple discussions at various times over the last year that, a particular item was important for various reasons. Hey, we got to think about having an extra, city council meeting. But the timing and the applicant getting their things in and stuff like that ultimately meant we didn't have to have an extra council meeting. But we talk about it all the time, right?
But we don't know that because we're not around. And just like we're still sitting here, and we had 2 really important special presentations. Probably should have had one, and then one on another night rather than back to back, so that we don't even start on the actual meat of the agenda until 8:30 in the evening. Now, I don't know about you, but I get up at 5 in the morning. So for me, it matters. And looking at our bylaws, I just think we can do a better job as council members giving service to this community. I think that's what we're supposed to be doing by not putting it all in one night. I get that it's a pain to put the agendas together and getting all that stuff, but then we need to change the council meeting regulations, or really think about it. I just feel like we're shortchanging democracy. There you go.
Well, noticing the schedule, we've got, we do have meetings every third Wednesday, or every third Monday scheduled. I think, I don't know if it worked out that way this year as well. But perhaps.
The schedule mimics what we did this year.
Yeah, so if we're looking at changing the code, work around that and whatever verbiage would be necessary because we went to 1 meeting a month in summers for quite some time. I don't know I don't know how long it predates my 10 or 11 years.
It's been since I've been on the council.
Yeah, so and that seems to work, and then we do end up with those dead ones in winter instead of like having staff not know or being prepared. I mean, I think this worked well. We're essentially, I think it worked well. And so if there's a way to define the code to say regular meetings occur on the 3rd Monday of every month with additional meetings, I don't know, or something like that. But, you know what I'm saying?
Extend the debate, but.
Okay.
Do we lose something for helping citizens that are trying to develop by not having the meeting on the 1st Monday? Because I know we have that plan commission. That tends to be the big one.
Well, the first Monday runs into a lot of holidays with January 1st, July 4th,
I hear you.
Labor Day.
I can tell you last year, we didn't slow down one single applicant because of our meeting schedule.
I mean, the wording of the code can be worked out. I mean, it could be something as simple as the Common Council shall meet at least once a month and a second time per month when necessary, or something like that.
But who determines what's necessary? Again, I'll just go back to the fact that I think there's a reason for 2 meetings a month, and part of it is thoughtful discussion and time, not just, every month. That means every single committee we have to hear from, because, so the meetings are just that much. The one meeting you have is going to be 2.5 to 3 hours, which might be okay for a lot of you, but I just feel like you lose your focus. We've been sitting here for 2.5 hours, and we still have a lot to discuss, and that I think is part of the problem. Can we cover it? Sure, but how well?
I think tonight,
I don't have a strong opinion one way or another, but I think tonight's been an exception.
that's what I
And I
was going to
think
say.
more often than not, we've been done by 8:30 this year, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. I
We
think
have
tonight's
had
was an exception. I think there are opportunities to find us efficiencies. We don't necessarily need 35 slides from somebody where 10 would be adequate. And that presentation could have, both presentations possibly. But I think tonight was an exception. Otherwise, the meetings have been very efficient.
Okay, so you want, I think I'm hearing that you want us to move this to the next council meeting, and we'll have some, well, we got to follow the code changing process, so that could take 60 days or more to do that.
Why? No, this isn't a zoning code, so it
Oh,
doesn't require a public
Right,
hearing
but
or
I'm
anything.
talking
Oh,
about
okay.
businesses, they have
It's
to
not,
have a
okay.
first and third.
So we could put that together and bring it to the next council meeting with the,
Right.
what should I call it, ordinance change? I don't know where this is.
Yeah, it would be an ordinance.
Ordinance change?
Well, it's in the municipal code, so I don't know where you want it, but it's in the code that says that
I'm
we
assuming it
shall have
requires a public
regular
hearing, but I'm
meetings
being
on
told
Thursday.
not.
It does not require a public hearing. It only requires a public hearing if it's part of the zoning code.
Okay.
So being in chapter 2, it's a simple ordinance passed by the council.
Okay.
So am
Because
I
there
here?
are special meetings too. The second paragraph talks about special meetings, if you want those. But it just, that's just my question. If we're going to do this a second year in a row, is that becoming a regular policy? And if so, ought we just consider changing it? Because I agree with Matt, there have been a lot, most of the times, tonight's an exception, that the meetings haven't been wildly long.
So the staff would just need direction on how to write up that ordinance, if we want to do it as proposed in this packet, or if we want to do something that adds a few more meetings back due to Jackie's concerns, or
So-
what do we want to do?
So my recommendation is to write it as to what you have in the packet, just so that we're in compliance with the code for what you want, because we can always call special meetings to be called
Always.
by the mayor or by 2 aldermen. That's already in there. So just go ahead and, just be consistent with what the code says. So
Yeah.
change the code to be consistent with the schedule you put in the packet.
Okay. All right.
And I think it's of special note that 2 alderpersons can call a meeting with notice.
Sure. Or we'll call the extra meeting just because there's important business that needs to be
Absolutely.
done and the staff is aware of it.
Absolutely.
'Cause we don't want to hold up any applicants because of waiting on the common council.
Absolutely.
You got it clear, Tom?
I do.
Great. No motion. Okay, that was 7A. 7B, discussion and possible action to appoint Larry Firm to the Promotion and Tourism Commission to replace Shannon Eldridge. Term to end April 2020.
Also move.
Second?
Second, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, passes. 7C, discussion and action to accept Jesse Grutz's resignation from the Lake Welfare Committee and the Community Development Authority.
So moved. Second?
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, passes. Okay, 8A, new business, discussion and possible action on the permanent placement of 2 Ice Age Trail signs. So if you refer to your packet to this item 8A, there's a couple of little photographs, aerial maps I showed with X's. I'm trying to make this as brief as I can, but cover the important points. So the Planning Commission took up the idea of what would we do with signs that were placed in the city of Delafield, like lion signs or Ice Age Trail signs or Tree USA city signs or Rotary Club, any number, Women's Club, any number of metal signs that might come up. And so the Planning Commission had that discussion and decided that they really thought those signs just really didn't fit into the modern age. They were given an alternative of places that they could place them within the city, and ultimately they had a good lengthy discussion and decided they just didn't see a need to have these signs located anywhere, and that was passed and approved. And then we found out about a month or a month and a half after that the city is actually has an agreement with the Ice Age Trail organization that part of the signed agreement we have says that we will place 2 of these signs in a entrance to the city of Delafield, of which we have many entrances to the city of Delafield. So once we became aware of this, the police chief helped put me in contact with the folks that are on the board of the Ice Age Trail, and I had a meeting with them, and we spent a lot of time discussing the importance of the Ice Age Trail and what they're really concerned about. Not so much the signs, while they're important, but that we are embracing the Ice Age Trail idea and that we're doing what we can to help promote it. So we promote it on our city website, we promote it in our literature, we promote it in our communicating article. And we had a discussion and talked about places in the city where we might be able to place these signs, and they were in unanimous agreement that these 2 locations would fit the signed agreement that we have. And I'm looking for your approval to approve these 2 signs.
I'll make a motion that we endorse the 2 red spots on the agenda.
I will
Ice
second.
Age Trail sign.
Don't you think there's irony that they didn't think it was like connected to like a modern thing, whatever, and it's an Ice Age Trail? I mean, there's a sense of irony that's just leaping out at me here. It's the Ice Age Trail, it's not modern. That's the point. And I love them. I think they're beautiful. So, and I know the effort that was put in by Chief Keel. I was on the committee too, to make us an Ice Age Trail community.
Yeah.
So.
Which we're very proud of.
Are you seconding my motion?
I will second that motion.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Thank you very much. 8B, discussion and possible action on the creation of daylight policy presented by Alderperson Valdy and Alderman Eichert.
Using the KISS principle, we have short slides. And do you want me to read that, or should we just leave the daylight policy? I'll just go through it real quickly.
Sure.
Why have it? We're already, if you want to skip my 2 more slides forward. Slides.
It's in the packet.
Yeah, in the packet, it's, there it is. I don't know if you can go forward anyway. The point of the daylight policy really is that some of the big decisions are often paid attention to and are in the papers and communicated quite clearly. And I do think the city does a lot to try to communicate big and small decisions, as we're doing here. And what is in my mind is a daylight policy could give people an opportunity to learn about some of the things that are going on in the city through the city's website, Facebook page, and a couple of other ideas that Tim and Michelle have actually brought forward. And that would be on slide 98, a couple of examples. You can go forward again, then keep going. There you go. Thank you. 3 examples, like the unanticipated repair to the library's AC. Tim talked about maybe at times the city will spray pesticides or herbicides in local parks. Just an easy way for folks to know about things like that, small projects. Michelle came up with an idea of putting it on the city's Facebook page, website, not necessarily, our idea was really like a scrolling banner like ESPN, like, you know, something's rolling at the bottom, but that's a more expensive thing that we don't have. So it might be something that's more like a banner that would just let people know that the city is in talks to maybe do something. The city is looking to start. The library just had 2 paintings, you know, that they are being granted, or connections to even what was brought in one of the presentations about what's traffic calming. How does that work? And just some of the ideas that are going on. Hey, can you connect to street trees? You know, I know we have that, but people don't always know where to go. So just another way to sort of over-communicate, or not really over-communicate, but to communicate some of the smaller decisions that might get lost in the shuffle. In the proposal, we're looking at a way for the city to communicate proactively. It is meant to supplement formal legal communication requirements, and mostly to elicit maybe productive feedback from the community. The effort will be on best effort basis, managed by city staff, really with the department leaders communicating with Michelle about these things that are going on. Just like before a common council meeting, I contact our chief librarian, Stephanie Ramirez, our director. What do you want me to focus on? What's important, you know, before I go before council? And then reasonable efforts will be made to utilize available technology just to push the information forward. So this daylight policy is really something that will be no big change in what we're already doing, except an additional. Could be like a postcard notice, depending on what it is, but it will start with department meetings and department heads communicating. Am I missing anything? All right. And this, I believe, is a discussion in action.
So what's the cost?
There is none.
No cost.
No. It's really just a
It's just
augmentation
updating the
and
website
practice.
and practice.
Yeah, and there might be a slight cost if someone gets a postcard, but it would be not like a bulk mailing. So it would be negligible.
But how do you decide how the postcards go? I mean, I know there was a project on West Shore Drive that generated this to start with, and
Yeah, but really, that's.
And we did mail a postcard.
Yeah, and there's the other. I think actually that was sort of the beginning. But what has happened is the more I've talked about this with people like Tim, Michelle, and citizens, the more it came to the idea of it wasn't just that, it was things going on like at the library, being on the library board when they had an issue with air conditioning, and they literally had to close the library for a couple of days. And just ways to give people notice about, oh, that was an additional expense in the city budget. Here's why. And so it's more a question of proactive communication. I really loved like Tim's idea about pesticides when you spray herbicides. That's just, we know, or I don't know for a fact, but I'm guessing that the city follows protocol and the public works does what they have to do. But maybe that word isn't getting out so that before I take my nephew or myself a walk through the park, I know that I'm allergic to that type of spray, and I can click on the website to see what little things are going on. So that's really the idea, that it can be refined as we go along, but it isn't meant to be a big expense or a big change in what we're doing now. There's an example in the slideshow of a public notice that could be on a postcard. Basically that there's going to be like ditch work on September 1st and it's going to happen here, and contact the city. So that's more, the more I thought about it, the more I thought it's little things and little notices that might make it, make us seem more communicative. Because right now I get, a lot of feedback I get, don't you like our shirts, Tim? Come on, that was a great song.
Yeah, that was the 4th of July.
Yeah, we can't tell us apart. Anyway, that is the proposal. It's very serious, even though I tried to make it light. Mostly, the little things sort of make us build that relationship.
I think there's something on the agenda tonight. If we're really going to survey on Nagowica Road, we probably should send a card out
Or even a public notice.
to those.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean,
Yeah.
I think we should do it, and that's a little item where those property owners should know who's surveying.
Michelle, do you know what postcards cost between printing and postage?
I don't know the printing cost, depending on how many we do, we could print some of them in-house and run them, and I think it's 38 cents a piece versus 50 cents for a letter.
Didn't it cost us $600 to do the postcards for the deer management?
That was the entire city.
Yeah, so entire city would be about that price.
But a street would be maybe $50.
It's always challenging defining the area to send to. Like we talked about before, West Shore Drive, we sent the letter to, I think it was 11 property owners, the nearest 11 property owners. That wasn't sufficient in a lot of people's minds. So I think this is a good start, and I think we would want to, as a staff, try to propose some particulars as far as a
But I
written
think
policy.
we have to bring up, I once in a while mention it. We have to mention it, and I think on Nagowica Road would be one where you should send a card. If you're
And-
sending a survey crew, I'd
And
send a card.
Inevitably, we're going to miss stuff because, as an example, we had this wetland exemption on West Shore Drive, which at the time I thought was a minor issue that nobody would really care about. I would have thought to have send out a mass notification. And later this year, actually just recently, I was reviewing one of SEH's invoices, and on there it was for the Gulf Road roundabout. And on there, one task that they worked on was a wetland exemption for that project. I knew nothing about it. I called up Mike. I said, "Hey, what's this wetland exemption?" He said, "Yeah, there was some wetland plants at the bottom of the Holiday Inn stormwater pond that we're creating, so we had to do the exemption." So he didn't even think to mention it to me. It was just more of a formality thing that they had to dot the I, cross the T as part of their design process.
And that can get pretty mundane, some of those things. So my way of digesting this and what Jackie brought up was thinking that we need. I'm not a fan of another place to post stuff on the web where you have to go look for it. And I really like the notify me service.
Yeah.
And I think just right on the back of that, I mean, I don't think I'm going to be bothered if I get 2 of those a week instead of 1 of them a week, because they're easy enough to delete, right? And I think if we just piggyback on something like that you've already got, and but like you said, talk it over with staff. But the thought is, just think about what issues have come up in the past and what would be appropriate to just put a note on there for, I thought of a different example when Cushing School about 2 or 3 years ago there was some false alarm about a gun someplace, and Highway C was just mobbed, and there was public safety people everywhere. The captain or the police chief sends out notices to us. I mean, those would be perfect things to post. Very short blurbs. They end up in the paper in more detail, but what's going on? Just as a way to forward it out, and we know, everyone should know.
But people have to sign up for that.
I know, but that's why I post, posting this in our communicator, which everyone's already going to get.
And we did an article on it in the last one.
Saying you're going to get all sorts of information.
And I'm more in favor of that than I am with the postcard mailouts. Because if we're talking about $600 citywide, I've got 3 major projects just in the last 6 months. Hendricks, Highway C and 94, Chick-fil-A. And the multiple meetings that go along with those. Are we mailing out for the Plan Commission, the Common Council? I mean, that is 600, 600, 600, 600, it adds up. and it's mission creep.
But the
And
whole
then where
point of
does
the
it end?
daylight policy is you don't need them for those. Those are big projects. They get public hearings. I'm talking about the little things, so they won't be citywide. The whole point is it's just small.
I like the enhanced website, I like the notify me. Above and beyond that, I don't know that it's, like you said, they're in the paper, they're in
Yeah.
other medium.
You know, I'd be concerned, you know, with the notify me. Tim, you mentioned going from 1 a week to 2 a week. I'd be concerned, you know, at some of the scope we're talking about, that this would be 3 or 4 a day with the air conditioners out. There's new paintings in the library. This program's in the library. Police are moving the radar signs. And then if you start doing that, then people start ignoring them, and then the real important messages get lost in the minutia.
There is a responsibility of citizens, and you know the people up here take that responsibility seriously. That's why we all volunteer, essentially. And there is a responsibility of citizens out there to be involved at the very minimum in city government of knowing what's going on. If we can enhance that in a zero-cost way, I'm in favor of it. But you're exactly right. When does one notification about X become 10 notifications?
And maybe to Matt's point, that's exactly where we go moving forward, not take action on this, but actually then look at, maybe talk to department heads, does that make sense? About when, because I don't want people to get overly distracted with minutia, but I think we right now pay attention to the big stuff and then little things.
Yeah, and maybe,
Yeah.
I mean, for department heads, you can send out one notice a month.
Right.
What's your most important thing that you want to send out, that's pertinent, that you want people to know about? And it's only one.
And maybe, you know, as we implement it, there'll be some, you know, trial and error. We'd look for feedback from the council. Hey, you didn't post this and we think this is worthy, or you did post these 2 things and that's getting a little too ticky-tacky, and we'll find the right balance between what we do.
Like I said
promote and
before, we don't need to know you're buying a box of paper clips.
No, that's, yeah.
So I think, for now, the important thing is, if you want to know what's going on in the city, sign up for Notify Me.
Yeah.
Because you can select a whole bunch of, you can select it all, you can select part of it, the things that are important to you, and we will push the information to you so you don't have to go look for it if you tell us that you're interested. So we've been doing that for over a year, and how many people do we have signed up for that roughly?
We have approximately 30 categories, and on average, 60 a category.
Okay, so we have a lot of you signed up now, but you know, we want you to be informed, so please sign up more.
To be continued.
Sounds good. All right, 8C, discussion with possible action on the 2019 impact fee adjustment. Tom?
Yeah, this is an exercise that we go through each and every year. There's a standard formula that Marie puts our asset costs and whatnot into, and it defines what the impact fee will be for the next year. These impact fees will take effect January 1st. And if you look at the numbers, they are just slightly lower for next year than what they are for this year. And so I would recommend approval of those fees.
I move to approve the fees.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention passes. Okay, 8D, discussion and possible action to approve a capital budget amendment for an additional $6,000 to perform a preliminary survey work necessary for a separate safety pedestrian path on Nagawicka Road from Oakwood Road to the Bark River Bridge and Oakwood Drive, Phase 1, from Genesee to Hillcrest Drive. So in your packet, you have a letter from the city engineer that's kind of detailing that it's $4,000 for Nagawicka Road and $2,000 for Oakwood. I always get Drive, because we have 2 of them. And this is, proposals will be in the capital budget for you to review, but if there's a possibility of having construction, I'm summarizing what the city engineer said, that we would need to get this survey work done now because it'd be difficult to do in the winter, and we would have the opportunity, if approved, to bid them out with the road projects, which always is going to give us a better price on that construction as to doing it by itself or later in the process or delaying the road project. This is the most efficient way to get the information we need to be able to bid it at the lowest cost, I think is kind of how I want to summarize it.
But we haven't approved the project.
No, no, so this is,
So we might spend $6,000 on a project that's not going to be approved.
there is that possibility. Or it might get delayed to the following year. But the
So-
survey work,
So, and I know we've gone through this a couple times, but, and it's a cart before the horse. I know you need some survey work before you can draw some things up to show people what we have in mind.
right.
And, I know that a few years ago, Nagawicka Road was a no-go on a path, though I think you're thinking of the different side now. I don't know.
Yeah, that was more than a decade ago.
Yeah. But, I
So
guess, I
it's
think
the
we should.
minimal cost effort to get the information. I mean, trust me, in prior years, we've spent $20,000-$30,000
We're
and
trying
then
to
have the
avoid-
project not go
Yeah,
through, right?
right.
This is the absolute minimum to get the information to be able to inform the people along the path of a realistic plan that they would be asked for their input in, obviously. And some of that's already been done.
And I support the projects, but I also understand the principle that Wayne brings up and kind of putting the cart before the horse.
And it is the capital budget.
I think I do support these things too, but I think we should just put it in the capital budget for next year with a build in '21. Personally, you put enough money to collect the data. We put it in the budget this year, we might get some early comments. I just think it's more consistent with our efforts now to try and take some time to get these things right. I know, Mayor, you want to build these things, and I do too, but I want to really build them. And it seems to be that, and I've said this before, it applies in any community. The sidewalks are never, 100%. It's about a third.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes a little bit of, hand-holding to get to the 40, 30, 20, where 40 you like it.
Yeah. Well,
Can we argue there's an urgency to these projects in any way that would necessitate?
The urgency is the pictures that's being shown up on the screen right now. It's the safety of our citizens who in survey after survey have asked for these projects to be completed. And we delay and are concerned about sometimes just a very small number of people. And I know that we've got information all along the path on Oakwood Road where we have unanimous support of the adjacent property owners, and we have very similar information for the people that are involved on Nagawicka Road. And I'm really not interested in delaying or pushing this off. I'm interested in trying to get this done. And it's to improve the safety. I mean, a significant improvement in safety, and it's at the minimal possible cost that we can do it at. And our citizens along these roads are asking for this.
So, do we have any budget savings this year that we could just redirect?
I've asked that question.
Yeah, Tim, the answer is yes. We've got the funds, but redirecting is a budget amendment.
No, I know that.
And that's what you're being,
Yeah.
that's what's before you.
But we're
tonight.
adjusting the capital budget or
I mean,
the
staff can't just
operating?
take excess funds and
No, I
spend
know,
it on.
I know. This is entirely appropriate,
Yeah.
but, so are we talking about operating budget or capital?
Capital.
So you have savings elsewhere in capital that you want to redirect.
There's adequate funds in our capital fund balance to use for this.
So you're saying fund balance?
Capital fund
It
balance.
might, it might get pushed off to 2021 in the budget process anyway. I mean, but spending, you'd be doing the survey work now, or you'd be doing it in a year, and the geography's not gonna change. I mean, I'd say do it now.
Yeah, that was my question. Is this survey required even if the capital budget was approved, you still have to do the survey.
Right, and then we'd be delaying it, at least a year, and if we tried to jam it through, we're not going to get a good price, right? I mean, this is the most economical way to look at this. We're not going to spend design money and expensive stuff like that until it is approved in the capital budget. We need a little bit of money to just get the ball rolling.
Yeah, living in this area, this is my constituents' #1 complaint or desire, because it is a major safety issue. I don't know how often people walk, drive, bike along Nagawicka Road, especially when kids are getting picked up at school and there's no shoulder, and it's extremely dangerous. I've lived there 24 years, and I've never seen so many family people, walking with kids, with strollers, along the gravel, basically, because there's no shoulder. And I've seen people get run off the road. I've taken these pictures, and I wasn't even spending any time. This is probably a matter of 2 days, where kids are walking alongside the road. My kids won't even ride their bike. They can't. I don't trust them to go from my house all the way to the river, because it's just too dangerous. So this is, at least in my constituent District 1, was their #1 issue when I asked them, was a safe passageway for their families to travel up and around Nagawicka Road.
We'll make a motion to
I
bend
will
the
make a motion to amend and approve the capital budget to add $6,000 for a preliminary study of work to be performed on Nagawicka Road and Oakwood Drive from Genesee Street to Hillcrest Drive.
I'll second.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Can you raise your hands? Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Motion passes. Thank you. All right, 9A, Administrator's Update on Manure Injection on Gale Farm Land, Fall of 2019.
Yeah, in your
Update.
packet, you'll see that we did receive notification that they do not intend to inject manure this year, and they said they would keep us posted on their plans for next year, for spring of next year.
Okay.
Good
We
news.
forgot E, didn't we? Adopt a river?
Oh, we did.
I have
I
one
missed
comment
88.
on,
I'll go back.
since that's on the agenda, right? The Gale thing.
What's that?
It's on the agenda, right?
Right.
So I was talking to some folks in Neshota, and I just want to put it on the list, the checklist. And these are not neighbors, these are some of the people that live right downtown. And they said their frustration is when they ran the trucks up the hill there over the bridge, that the stuff fell out on the road.
Slopped
And
down
so
on the road.
that comment never showed up anywhere here, but I thought I'll place it out there that not only it's the injection, but maybe the delivery, that they're careful. Because if that's an issue, it will just blow up again. So we're trying to add the list of all the things that will make this thing work, so we
Yeah.
can preserve the farmland.
And we certainly had spillage on Mission Avenue as well, and it was.
So that would be something that on the checklist, because that was their perspective. It's frustrating because.
We're just talking about runoff into rivers too.
Yeah.
And if it's showing up all over the road, no, we
Well,
get
if
it.
it's on the road, it's going in the river.
I know, that's what I mean. Oh, that's good. Thanks for bringing that up. 'Cause
So I just wanted to add it, since I heard that.
Okay, is that it for the Gale?
It is.
Okay,
yes.
and I apologize, I missed 8E, so I got to go back. Discussion and possible action on the approval of the Adopt a River program reviewed by the Lake Welfare Committee and the Park and Rec Commission. So, Mike, if you could go to the pictures that are associated with 8E.
He is there.
He's on there.
Oh, got him up there? Okay. So, as you might be familiar, we have an Adopt a Street program in the city of Delafield. So there's a number of places, whether it's the Delafield Lions who pick up garbage along, and that's what the purpose is, picking up garbage, is along Highway C. My family and I and friends do Nagawicka Road on the other side of the city, Oakwood. The horse farm does Oakwood Road. We have probably 20 different organizations that participate in the Adopt a Street program. This group, the company name is Gunsmoke. They have a business here in the city of Delafield. They reached out and have really enjoyed the beauty of the new river that we have here and the access to it. And they said that they would like to clean up the river and pick up garbage, very much the same way that we do on city streets. And so I suggested to them that we had a street program. Would they be interested in signing up and sponsoring if we change the name, Adopt a River? And they were so excited about it. They said, absolutely. You know, there's actually an agreement with it. It covers the city for liability and a number of other documents. We basically had the attorney looked at the street. He modified them to be applicable to the river, and they would love to participate in such a program. So on Adopt a Street, at the beginning of where you start and the end of where you start, you get a small sign about yay big that you may be familiar with, and we would have a sign that would say Adopt a River, and then underneath it, the name of the company or the group that would be sponsoring that. And that can change, right? You may do it for 2 or 3 years, then you don't want to do it anymore, and somebody else or nobody else takes over the responsibility. So it's on the agenda tonight for your consideration and possible approval to approve an Adopt a River program, and the Gunsmoke group would be on there. Now, Park and Rec reviewed it, had some conflict as to how it would coincide with what the Friends of the Bark River have done, which many of us are members of that. But that's kind of a separate entity. It's a separate process to this concept. And the Lake Welfare Committee reviewed it and suggested the passage of it unanimously. So that's why it's here.
Park and Rec's general consensus was, first of all, we're grateful for this organization for stepping forward and, participating in the community. That's what, citizen action is all about. There was, so absolutely for it, but signage was the only contentious issue, as it always is in the city. Do we actually need another sign saying we've adopted this, we've adopted that? Obviously, signs are aplenty. So I'm all in favor of it with the exclusion of signage.
So when we do it on the street, we do have those signs that you're familiar with. So.
Was that a deal killer, this Gunsmoke, that they wouldn't adopt it without signage?
No. We basically presented to them, the concept. They were totally in favor, and then we updated the internal documents to make it a possibility.
Give them a square in a newsletter. I mean, that everyone goes in, like our communicator, it goes to everyone's house, right?
Absolutely.
Give them a 2x2 or whatever. Yeah. Find a spot for who's doing it.
Great.
So I'll make a motion that we do the Adopt a River program with a little PR in the Delafield newsletter.
Second.
And no sign.
No sign.
Second, no sign.
Any discussion?
Frequency of Adopt a River, do we want to limit their frequencies to?
Per the documents that we have, you're asked to do it twice a year.
Great.
And that would be the same for a street, and it's the same now for a river.
Thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, passes. Okay, 9B, clerk, discussion and action on the voucher list.
Yep, I'm just looking for a motion on that one.
I like a motion.
Maples,
Second.
second, thank you.
B2,
Well, we didn't get it all in favor.
oh, I'm sorry. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, passes.
Okay, then the second item I have on there is just that I'm advertising for poll workers that we're wanting for the 2020 election year. With my departure at the end of this year, I made an entire schedule for 2020 and went through all my numbers. And right now, specifically for the presidential in November, I'm looking for 30 poll workers, and we only have 11 that are available. We had many people drop out because they didn't want to do the 6:45 a.m. to 9 o'clock p.m. shift, which is very long. We do provide food for the poll workers, and they do get paid. So if you know anybody in Waukesha County, doesn't have to be in the city, in Waukesha County that wants to be a poll worker, I really encourage them to get in contact with me because we are only a third of the way there. I know we're a little bit more than a year out, but I like to plan ahead and get everybody trained. The only other thing I have is that I wanted to remind you that the budget workshop is Thursday, October 17th, here in the Common Council chambers at 6 o'clock. We used to do it over in the Public Safety Building. We're doing it here in the Common Council chambers. I'll give another reminder out for the first October meeting, but I wanted to make sure that gave you guys enough heads up to get that in your schedule. So Thursday, October 17th, here, 6 p.m., budget workshop. Thank you.
Did I understand you correctly? You said you had like a lot of people that dropped out because of the length of the shift?
Yeah, so if we wanted to have two shifts, like a 6:45 a.m. to like 2 and then a 2 to 9, we would need double the people. And so we would need 60 people for November, and we only have 11.
Could we, we could talk about that offline, but could we offer, like, if you want to work the whole shift, great, but if you only want to work half, we'll keep you, and then we just need to find the other half. Might be easier to find half.
I'll let you know when I get 45 applicants. I know that, in the past, since I've been here, we've kept the lines really down for the elections.
That's very important.
And that's my personal goal, is less than 15 minutes in line. So I desperately need people to sign up, because even for the February election, we're looking for 22, and we only have 8. Not that a February's
I know you're looking for volunteers, but you said it was also paid.
It is paid, it's $10 an hour. And they're fed lunch and dinner, and they're fed snacks and cookies, and they do potluck. And, yeah, so.
Michelle, past clerks have opined that partial shifts don't work well and introduce too many complications.
Everybody wants the morning shift, they want to be done by 2. They don't want to stay and do the cleanup after the polls have closed, so that is completely accurate, yeah.
So your preference is to stay with full-time?
Right.
All day?
All day, yeah. So if you know anybody at all, who's not on the ballot, send them my way. Thanks.
All right, thank you much. 10A, letter from town, correspondence, letter from town of Brookfield to the city of Delafield regarding a cooperative plan. 10B, 3 resolutions from the village of Summit to the city of Delafield regarding upcoming hearings in Summit. Seeing no further business, we are now adjourned.